This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
This may look like just a tranquil landscape across the scenes of Germany here in Nurburgring, but in just a few moments, it's going to become a scene of battles, of race cars, and then some here at the Nurburgring on the gigantic circuit here today, here in beautiful Germany. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from across the iRacing world, and welcome to RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network's coverage of the major series for the European region's Nurburgring 2.4 hours here from beautiful Germany. Of course, this is one of the most challenging racetracks on all of iRacing. More than 15 kilometers, more than 25 kilometers round with 16 total miles, and weather conditions that are seen at 63 Fahrenheit and 66 degrees track temperature. But it gets more complicated with that, and you'll see in just a few moments here for today's action. Justin Prince alongside Cam Walsh in the booth today, Paul Smith in director's seat for the first hour. Let's take a look at your Pro Championship standings with Christian Challenger up on top of the standings entering today's round. Dave Walsh sits in second with Yario Velarde sitting in the third spot as well, tied up in the second total in terms of points. Matthias Magnussen sits in fourth with Gabriel Ruse, Joshua Wolf, David E. Baker, Mikey Grems, Christian Rose, and Trevor Valesky rounding out the top 10 of the point standings, separated by more than 200 total in the standings. As well, some of the top teams look to try and add to their points totals. It's a more than 800-point lead for Kinetic Europe over Bombshell Motorsports International. Incorporated with Grizzly Motorsports sitting in third, the fourth spot Total Downforce Racing Europe with CQR Club rounding out the top five. Can-Am Racing, the Apex's entries with Unorthodox Motorsports and Boasthead Motorsport rounding out the top 10. Heading into today's round, a challenging round to say the very least. It's a different kind of race today. Let's bring in my partner for today, Cam Welsh, for today's broadcast. We were talking a bit about this today. It's a Predator format for today's race. Let's talk about what to expect for today with the different format today, Cam.
Yeah, absolutely. And hello, everybody. And hello, Justin and Paul. Well, what we're used to seeing is all of the different the cars and classes. Typically, your GT3s, your Kia, your MX-5, but it goes further than that. It's not the GT3s today. It's actually the 911 Porsche Cup cars, which, let's be real here, Justin. Around this Nürburgring circuit, there's really not a lot of difference in speed between the GT3s and the Cup cars.
Yes, there isn't that much of a difference in speed. The thing is, though, with the Predator format, what you got to think about, they're not going to start at the exact same time. That is something comparable to, say, a cat and mouse race from the old video games like Project Gotham Racing 4, where you're going to have the MX-5 starting off first, then the Kias, then those 911s that you mentioned. They're going to be released on up to 22-minute separation for the drivers that are going to be lining up on the racetrack today. It's going to be pretty different, so to say the very least, for drivers than they may be expecting compared to some other races.
Yeah, most certainly, and it's going to be a bit of a different look. I know that we normally always focus on the faster cars at the start of the race as they barrel on towards the first corner in the Nurburgring circuit, but what's going to be nice is we're going to be looking at the MX-5s when they get their start, and then the Kias will, of course, wait, and the Porsches will be waiting in their pit stalls for the signal from the Major Series command to get themselves out and about. Cars are getting on the grid right now, and they're getting moving underway.
Let's take a look at that starting grid. It's going to be a little jumbled, I will say, because there were some drivers that did practice. It is a randomized grid for today. Dirk Fetterman leads the MX-5s at the moment to today's starting grid. Technically slot to the 26th spot. You'll see the rest of the drivers taking part on your screen as they run coming into today, whether it's by point standings or when they join the session. The drivers in the MX-5s are 26th on back on that said starting grid graphic for today. As said, Dirk Fetterman starts off with Claude Berval starting in the second spot for the MX-5s. Darlene Mintz in 28th spot overall. Kurt Crum starts behind him with Lyndon Suave along with Clifton Naranjo along that group. Yuri Rigg along with Eric Mick will start in the 32nd, 33rd spots overall. Trevor Boreski, Travis Henderson, Marcus Niskanen, David H. Baker is also amongst that group, and rounding out the drivers in that group is Peter Vostrel. Those are the drivers that are mixed in for the MX-5s as they'll get ready to take the starting grid. All other classes to start in the pit lane for now. Travis Henderson will start from the pit lane today. Dirk Fetterman will be the control car for today's Predator race here on the iRacing Esports Network for the Major Series. The European region, round number 5, gets underway right now. Green flags up. We're underway from beautiful Germany.
And the inside line has barely gotten started, and that has allowed his Kurt Crum to come to the outside as they barrel in towards corner number 1, Justin, as looks to me like Claude Belval just wasn't able to get it going, but however, looks like we've got a clean start at least through 2 or 3 corners.
Yes, indeed, and a huge start as well for Dirk Fetterman. Dirk Fetterman, of course, for Ava Vervatic Sim Sport, is one of the most dominant drivers we've seen on the iRacing service for the MX-5s. He is now pulling away at the moment by as much as 5 car lengths already. Darlene Mintz currently in the 2nd spot. Belval sitting in 3rd, side by side, though, of course, for 4th, 5th on back at the moment. And Jurg as well in a mix of traffic at the moment, trying to make it 3 wide down the straightaway.
And as they go, they will go 3 wide as they go through that long right-hander here. It is a very quick maneuvering from Jury Jurg as they are still running at least 2 by 2 is Lyndon Swaby, and it looks to me like it's Trevor Vovorski, the number 10 MX-5 machine, as they are continuing to wrap around this Nurburgring, the racing circuit before they head themselves out onto the Nurburgring. Actually, Trevor Vovorski will take a bite out of Lyndon Swaby, and Lyndon Swaby will actually get spun out.
And Swaby's off into the grass. He's going to lose a lot of spots already amongst the 19 drivers on the circuit at the moment. And it's going to take him a little bit of time, of course, to get going. A bad break for him. Let's take a look at your race spot replay to see how that exactly happened. That again, P8. And you can see just they ended up both making contact. It looked like both of them lost control in the corner.
Yeah, it looked like maybe Trevor was just, they were both kind of trying to take the corner at the same time, and it just didn't seem to happen. Trevor was on the outside, Lyndon Swaby would turn onto the inside, and just not happy at all. He's just starting to get around, but whilst we've been watching that, the MX-5s have gotten onto the Nurburgring circuit, which is just about as fast as a car as I would personally like to take around this circuit because, well, they call it the green heck. That's what we'll call it, the green heck. As you could just see how the winding roads and the graffiti-laden track is part of what gives it this the legendary nomenclature that is the Nürburgring circuit.
And it's one of those challenging race tracks, as you mentioned, with the green heck. 170 total turns here, of course, with the Gersemstreck, pardon me, pronunciation. With today, these drivers have to try and manage currently going one down the long straights, and with these MX-5s, you see a lot of draft effect. with these drivers, and you're seeing Jurg currently trying to bump draft Kurt Crum, in fact, with that said speed, and trying to make the move. That again is currently for what would be about P number 5 on the racetrack, pardon me, P4, and they're also trying to get the third spot with Belval as they bump draft with him.
Yeah, it is turning into a bit of a high-speed traffic jam. This is at 130 miles an hour. Late braking is Juri Jurg. He'll go to the inside. This is a kind of a double right-hander here. Late apex going down the hill under the Yokohama Bridge, and then it works into a kind of a double left-hander here. But Juri Jurg in that 721 machine has managed to pick up that couple of positions there, being a bit gutsy for a 2.4-hour race. But you know what? If you know you've got the speed, you want to spend the time getting ahead early. As Darwin Mantz actually up ahead in the 72 machine, he got a little bit off camber with his braking, and that kind of packed them all up. So Juri Jurg has gotten away from one pack, and he's found himself in another.
And the drivers continue to cycle themselves around. To correct myself, of course, with qualifying for today, drivers were allowed to put in their times 4 times from Saturday to Saturday, 4 times a day, up to 60 minutes each time to try and slot themselves into where they were to start for today's race. And so far, you're seeing for some drivers, they've been struggling to get through the traffic. Some of them, such as, of course, Jurg, has been able to get on through so far. How challenging, of course, is it to pass here? Because while there's a lot of turns, it's not as simple as you think, of course, to pass here without causing a major incident, especially with no room for error, not just because of the space of the Armco barrier from left to right.
Yeah, and anything can certainly happen here, as this is a very, very steep downhill left-hander where you kind of go into a switchback. But you're finding as we're riding along with Juri Jurg, the 721 machine, he has only got but one car in front of him for now. That is Darwin Mantz. But the thing to remember is that there is Dirk Fetterman ahead of him. As you can see just how much the suspension travel is pushing these cars around. That's the part that you're talking about, as Jurg moves to the inside of the Darwin Mantz Bombshell Motorsports machine. There's a bit of a left-hander here, but it should be into the braking zone, which goes to the right, which means that Jurg will get the position. But it's as you can tell, it is very narrow. It is basically no more wider than a standard road, as of course this was undertaken as just a German earthworks project to kind of get people back to work in a way. And as such, we've been so gifted this great circuit, which has been held for so many decades, as Claude Belval is now looking to perhaps move around Darwin Mantz, but just isn't able to do it now.
And the more these drivers battle too, the more, as you mentioned, Dirk Fetterman can pull away, because he has already taken off and away in his MX-5 from all of this traffic that you're seeing bundling up for second on back. Belval still trying to find a way on by. Mantz still defending in terms of the front car as they continue to cycle towards through the turns, currently through 3/4 of the way around the racetrack at the moment as they head towards one of the bank turns, heading in towards the section. Jurg again getting the run on the inside line. Again having to get out of the gas though. It's getting more and more dicey between these drivers, but the more they get dicey, the more Dirk Fetterman pulls on away. He's already gotten a 5-second lead from everyone else because of all these battles.
Yeah, and not only that, the risk of incident is high here, especially with how the drivers can really equal out lap times despite taking different lines, as Clifton Naranjo will possibly look to the inside of Claude Belval. Doesn't happen, as Juri Jurg is looking to perhaps get around Darwin Mantz. It's not there for now, and if one of these guys has an issue, they could really collect a large bit of this MX-5 field, which would be a shame.
It'd be an absolute shame, and it could absolutely cause chaos, especially when the Kias come out of the garage area in just a few minutes. They'll be let out at the 2 hours, 49 minute and 10-second mark on the upper left corner of your screen in terms of the clock. The drivers have to make it 14 laps today in total around the Nurburgring circuit. And of course, with the different classes, that could potentially take all the time on that clock. Again, though, you're trying to make the pass. Mint can again defend, though, with the Bombshell Motorsports machine as they line back up. Currently, this is a 5-6 car train of vehicles all lining up together and trying to sort themselves out. Now they've lost a full second in the past minute and a half.
Yeah, and Dirk Fetterman, for the most part, he's basically just it looks like he is just having a fun Sunday drive, but alas, he is not. Dirk is an extraordinarily quick driver for Vavatic, and he is really able to push that MX-5 to its limits, as you can see, riding a bit of the outside curbing as he enters the small carousel. The Klein's carousel, as the rest of the cars come on in. It looks to me like it's still Darwin Mentz and Jerry Jerg.
And someone with trouble, as you see on your screen, though, Clifton Nerijo was pushed off the racing line into the sand and took him about a few seconds to get himself back onto the pavement. He lost at least 4, 5, 6 positions from being pushed up wide on the racetrack and has now lost that lead group for the time being. Belval, meanwhile, wants to try and move by the Bombshell Motorsports machine, and Fall Jurg now in front of that said group as they now head down the Donninger Ho, it appears, now heading down the longest, one of the longer straightaways, it appears, here for today, of course. One of the longest portions of the track where you can gain so much speed if you line yourself upright and draft with the cars in front.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't realize MX-5s are actually really draft-happy cars, which is always a good time around the Donninger Ho. As you can see, they have caught Yuri Jurg as he is running about 120 mile an hour. Everyone else is running about 125 mile an hour. They'll go 3 wide. Eric Mickey will crash into the outside barrier, and he will come back across the track before resting against the Armco barrier. And Justin, that's not what we want to see at 120 mile an hour in the fastest part of the racetrack.
Drivers do have a fast repair allowed, but as you can see, it was 3 wide. And you'll see the contact on the right side of your screen. Boom from the door, boom goes the hood, and boom goes the whole suspension as Mick will have to come into the pits after only 1 lap around the circuit.
Which is very unfortunate for Eric Mickey, as he's not going to be a happy camper about that one, that's for sure. Dirk Fetterman is your race leader with a 7-second gap after just 1 lap. Jerry Jurg is still covering against Claude Belval, and Darwin Mentz is Darwin and Kurt Crum now. 2 Bombshell teammates are going to have to lock together to see if they can track down both the Ava Vervatic and the Can-Am racing machines of Claude Belval and Jerry Jurg.
Meanwhile, let's head towards pit lane because in just about 10 seconds, all the Kias will be allowed to be released from the pit lane, and you'll see them all go off and away. They try and head onto the racetrack. They're already a lap behind, but of course, a big-time difference in speed. David Berklow will be the first one out of the pit lane. Matthias Magnussen leads them out with Gruber, along with Harold Tim Klussens, along with Jamie Rushworth. Michael Blake among the group. David E. Baker also lined up. Jorensen Krazier along with Bram Reniers. Adam Fresi Ponti along with Diego Jimenez Herrera, along with Enrico Leinhardt also lined up. They already have passed Travis Henderson, who started from the pits, and we already have them sliding their way around the racetrack already single file after exiting the pit lane.
Yes, these Kia, they're not touring cars. They're not really what you would call straight-up grand touring cars either. So this sort of inter-hybrid group is pretty much known, if you're not familiar with the Kia Optima, it was known in the North American World Racing Series. I can't think the name of it off the top of my head. But yes, Pirelli World Challenge, thank you. As these Kias, they are front-wheel drive machines. That's a very unique feature and part of what makes them so entertaining to run around this Nurburgring circuit, as right now it's David Berklow from Matthias Magnussen, from George Gruber, and then from George Gruber on back, it's going to be another one of those packs, Justin, that really we're going to have to keep an eye on as they head into the Nurburgring circuit proper.
And you can see right now from the back, currently they're cycled around 17th on back, 14th on back, but you're going to see the different speed if you head to David Berklow right now, because he is reaching one of the first MX-5s in open space right now. Lyndon Swaby will have to move to the right side of the racetrack for Kinetic. and moves out of the way quickly. And you can see the difference in speed just between the two. 125, 26 already for the Kias. Only 107 for some of the MX-5s at the moment in that same section into the braking zone.
And for David Barraclough, he will have to note, since this is Predator racing, this is a Predator racing format, these MX-5s, they are not obliged to move over. They don't have to yield that position. However, they're not allowed to play any games or block or anything, or make defensive moves, which is obviously understandable because you can just see from Lyndon Swaby how many of these Kia machines are passing him. I mean, he's in an MX-5, he's in a nice little fun sports car where these these Kias, they really are high performance vehicles, and you can definitely see the difference.
As you can see right now, going up and down the hills they go to try and sort themselves out. Currently still single file for the drivers at the moment. But the question is, how long is that going to be the case right now? The MX-5s are currently still single file, calmed down, but they're about to feel the wrath of the top Kia cars that are trying to make up a full lap. David Barraclough's right behind this group of cars you're following along with. You'll see them enter the picture in just a moment on the right side of your screen. Currently, Barraclough's running as much as 130, 140 in these same sections that these drivers are only running 110 with, as they try and line up and try and sort out the draft. It's currently a 5-car train trying to catch up to a 2-car train, with David H. Baker and Peter Vostro at the back of said lined up cars that are trying to form a train of themselves between the two of them behind everyone else in the 5-car group.
Yeah, and even watching along these MX-5 cars, they are really working their way through the group, and you'll see these Kias will come up and they will envelop these machines in maybe, I would say maybe 20, maybe 30 seconds time, but they'll first hit up Peter Vostrel before getting to David H. Baker, Marcus Niskanen, and Clifton Naranjo, who has recovered very well, mind you, as David Barraclough were on board, and you can see that wheel hub. Now, as far as pit strategy goes, there really isn't one with the Kia. They can only make it basically a couple of laps around here, and then they need to get tires and fuel, but of which we have a great view of that tire right now. 4 total laps around the Nurburgring circuit. Thank you. As I will say, Matthias Magnussen and David Barraclough are really starting to pull away from the rest of the Kia field.
Yes, indeed. Right now, you're seeing those two of them, in fact, pull away. They've shown a decent amount of pace already on the racetrack. It seemed to be a bit more aggressive compared to them. George Gruber's able to pull away a little bit. You got Pete Herod lined up with Tim Clausen behind him and Jamie Rushworth, and everyone else is falling on back. And the more quicker they go, the more they're going to have to deal with the MX-5s in a little bit. You'll see them come across the tree line in just a few moments here, but at this point, of course, you got to talk about drivers like Barraclough and Magnussen, two very strong drivers on the service in multiple different types of cars, and you're seeing why they were able to pull on away while the MX-5s sort themselves out for P number 6 on your screen.
Yeah, and that was Clifton Naranjo. Does go by Trevor Vavorsky. Vavorsky had to kick up a little bit of dirt there on his outside, but Vavorsky now getting locked in by Marcus Niskanen, as here comes a Kia. You could see the difference in the size between the Kia Optima and the as you can see the car going right there on the inside of the carousel. David Baker was planning on taking the inside of the carousel in order to block from Peter Vostrel, but it just wasn't there, and we've already had a bit of car contact with George Gruber, but they will slot their way through, playing zigzag through a couple of MX-5s, does the 123 machine, and as well as the 451 of Tim Klassen's, and they continue their way through.
Looking on board David Barraclough as he tries to work his way through the MX-5s. Some of them are being helpful. Again, you don't have to move off the line. You can't block, rather, either. And you can see David Barraclough is having some issues trying to use one of the cars as a pick. That is Marcus Niskanen. He is trying to use a pick to get away from Magnussen at the moment, and it's already pulled away by 3-4 car lengths. However, he's going to have to deal with Naranjo along with Vorowski, who are nearly side by side in front of him right now, to the point where you've seen him slam on the brakes in the apex of the corner, has to slam on them once more as he tries to go to the right side of the racetrack and is able to break up that said battle for the time being. But because of all these MX-5s, he's now up to about a 4-car length distance to the next Kias that the 2 MX-5s slam behind.
Yeah, Trevor Vovorski has taken a hefty bite out of the rear of Clifton Naranjo, and now the Kias are all slotting by as Matthias Magnussen, followed by George Gruber, and then Tim Klassen's coming right on through. As Tim Klassen's his front wheels, they break traction, but only for a moment's time with these cars. We have to remember the travel is very different with the car when the entire drive system is in the front. Those rear tires are doing nothing but holding the car, not on the ground. As David Barraclough ends up getting a nip taken out by Kurt Crum in the MX-5s as they run on through, but it looks to me like everyone for the most part is playing nice from now, as I'm sure in just a few moments time those Porsche Cup cars are probably getting ready to rock and roll.
They're expected to be released at 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 45 seconds on the clock in the upper left-hand corner of your screen today. So that will be something to watch for. As you talked about a little bit in terms of the pit strategy, the Kias, they have to pit every couple laps. Of course, the fuel is poured in from a can, and they change cans every 5 gallons. They're expected to pit 3 times today, MX-5s and the Porsches just once. But as you can see down the Donner Ho, it is absolute chaos with the mix of Kias and MX-5s. You got Claude Berval and Jurg that are battling for second overall, while trying to let on by drivers going triple the amount of speed lined up on the right side of the racetrack. Dirk Fetterman is going to start seeing these said drivers as well zoom on by. And I wonder what he's probably thinking in the different type of race car with these cars, making it like, okay, I want to make a pass, but I also know if I make the pass, I'm probably going to get a bite taken out of my entire race car.
Yeah, most certainly. And these Kias, these proper tunes racing cars, they're doing about 165, 170 down the Dontner Hill, whereas these Kia MX-5 cars are really just more of have safety modifications made more than anything. They were doing about 120, so it's about a 40 mile an hour gap, as it looks to me like the Porsche Cup cars are pretty much all lined up, and they look like they are all ready to go, I'm sure. In just a few moments' time, or are they going to wait even longer? I was kind of thinking that we would hit that 2:37-minute mark, but looks like they're going to have to hold them back just a little bit longer. But I will say, after 2 laps around this Nurburgring circuit, we have already seen a significant amount of action, Justin, and thankfully we haven't really had anything too crazy outside of that incident with Eric Mickey.
Yeah, this has been an absolutely crazy race so far for some of them. Right now, you're looking at some of the Kia Optimas at the moment. Still about less than 2 minutes until the rest of the drivers are released, but we're looking at a battle for 16th at the moment. This is between Gruber and Klassens. Gruber, of course, one of the better road course racing drivers on the circuit for Torque Freak Racing. And he's trying to defend, of course, Tim Klassens, who is a bit of an underrated driver. Some people have seen him across the service, but the ones that have known him to be at least a top 5 contending driver when he's in the right situation. Right now, he's in the right situation to try and make the move on Gruber, his teammate.
Yeah, most definitely, and it's just something of setting yourself up, but you don't want to cause an incident with your teammate, not only just because, well, you don't want to hit your teammate as they take the uphill left-hander onto the Nurburgring circuit. It's really you want good competition. You want people around you. You want to have something to really have a race with. As it looks like we're about maybe 30 seconds away, maybe 20 seconds away from that Porsche Cup cars getting released. I think, because I've already heard the 1 minute mark from race control.
Make it 10 seconds. Why don't we go over to those drivers, in fact, because they're about to get the green flag. Countdown's up and away. The drivers are onto the gas pedals right about now. Away they go. Off and away we go for the Porsches. The fastest cars in today's race already off and away from the pit lane. Amongst those drivers are points leader Christian Challoner leading them away into the first corner. Gabriel Ruse amongst the group. Joshua Wolf along with Miro Verande along with Riley Thompson. Franco Scurri also amongst the group. Marcel Unger, Sean A. Fleming, Thomas Peterson, your Joris Perkeritz along with Edo Vila. Silvan Milad rounding out the drivers in the group. But right now, this is where some of the top points leaders are at the moment. You want to follow along with your favorite driver? Make sure to go to racespot.tv/timing to follow along with where your favorite driver is across the circuit today, because you're going to need it to make sure, because it is a 3-lap difference between the drivers leading in the MX-5s and these Porsches you're following along with Challenger leading them in through the S's.
Yeah, Gabriel Roux right behind in that kinetic racing machine. He has managed to get up maybe a 5-car length gap, which is nothing here at the Nurburgring circuit, as right now Christian Challenger is leading them, as we've got a couple of cars going side by side here. Looks to me like it's Marcel Unger as well as Uldis Putklius of Kinetic. They were side by side just for a moment's time, as Thomas Pedersen was able to watch that in his mirror if he so chose. But it looks to me like these Porsches are significantly gapped out already, which is interesting, I suppose. You would expect that these cars would at least hang together, much like their other racing class compatriots, as Christian Challenger is now on the Nürburgring circuit in his Porsche 911 Cup car for the first time.
Following on board, meanwhile, with Gabriel Roux, of course. We talk about Challenger a lot on the iRacing Esports Network for one reason, of course, being a part of the Peak Antifreeze iRacing series. But now he is trying to deal with defending in the road course car. Also takes part, of course, in the road course car. Sets up road course setups for various different series, in fact. And he's having to deal with Gabriel Roux, who is one of the top drivers for Kinetic Racing's entire organization for road course racing. And Joshua Wolf, who is behind there looking quietly to say, if there's a mistake, I'm ready to move up to second in the Porsches for the time being.
Most definitely, and I'm looking up ahead the track here. It's not that far until they can get to those Porsche. I think they're 991s actually. They are not 911s, so they're 991s, because you have to have that back and forth. It's not that significant amount of time. The MX-5s of Travis Henderson and Eric Mickey are currently going through Adenauer, whereas Christian Challenger, as Joshua Wolf has decided to take a bit of a rallying excursion. I know it might look like a rallying stage on the map, but I assure you there's pavement, Josh, as he gets his car back on. I'm not sure if he had help with that, but he loses positions to Riley Thompson and João Valverde in the process.
Yeah, look at the gear. Look at the left side of your screen. You've seen when he shifted down to the 4th gear, his engine seemed to over rev, and that kind of caused the car to kick out a little bit, overturn, run the corner, and in turn send him to the sand trap. That's something you got to watch for. It's something called the money shift a little bit if you blow up the car. You can also downshift and over rev the engine and cause that loose condition like we've seen there.
Yeah, most definitely. The engine doesn't know what to do with it. The drive shaft wants to over rev. It causes tires to really overdo it, as it were, and you end up the car snaps straight, and you end up really with no significant traction. As right now, this is an interesting. That was like a GoPro cam basically on that MX-5. Is right now we're watching this continued battle here. It's a trio here, Clifton Naranjo. So this is obviously our fight for what will be about 6th position, as it is just a grand party. I'm happy to see this, Justin, because normally what you could expect, a smaller number field of cars, everyone just splits off and runs their own races, but we've been seeing these MX-5s. They really are staying close to each other for this first section of this Majors European split race. Yeah,
the drivers that were able to break the toe have been able to pull on away with their respective groups. Then you have these said groups themselves right now. This is, again, 6th, 7th, 8th that are working together. They are currently trying to reel in Darwin Mintz and Kurt Crum that are up the road at the moment. And it's kind of something with the MX-5s I've seen a lot of times where if you end up losing pace early, you got to start working with the drivers in front of you to be able to try and draft your way back up to them. They're sort of like stock cars, a little bit like that, where you have the possibility of doing that. On the flip side, though, if you break away from the said drivers, it's much more easier to gain time, it seems, if you're on your own if you're able to not make mistakes, rather.
Yeah, and it's so easy to start making a mistake. You make one mistake, it leads you into the second corner. You're already off in a way, and that just kind of adds on to the issues as Trevor Vovorski is still defending for Marcus Niskanen. But we have so much action now to follow on the racetrack. It's always easier when you have as we're seeing a replay from Bjorn Kaiser. This is in the Kia class with Team Mad, the 076. As you can just see, the right rear just hits the grass, and then he hits the dirt, and I don't know if he actually clipped the Armco.
Well, I'll give you a hint. He no longer has a hood, so in terms of that, he actually slammed the Armco, as you see him go around in about a 720 on the pavement. And he is also wrecked again in live action, in fact, on the racetrack, hitting the Armco on the left side this time. So that car is severely damaged. He does have a faster pair available. He does, however, have to at least make it down the Donninger Hogue to be able to get down into the pit lane to get the car fixed.
Yeah, and you get a good look at that Kia engine. That is not a happy time there, as he is running, I think, at a crabbed angle. Which means that he has front suspension damage, which is so easy to do here. As he goes down the Donner Hill, he's still running about 140 mile an hour, so he will be able to get in and get himself repaired. As Adam Fasciaponte is also coming down pit lane right now. Not quite sure what this is about. He might be trying to get off pace, but I do notice a little bit of front end damage on that 84 car, but he might just be trying to fuel up and get tires and maybe a little bit off sequence.
That is a possibility. Looking back right now, a little bit on my side of things, he is down the pit lanes, the first one in. It looks like he has come at least to get his fuel and tires. Again, you do have a faster pair available, and for other drivers, they're trying to just be playing fast. The Bombshell Motorsports machines are working together at the moment, as you can see, with Crum and Mintz currently bump drafting each other down into the straightaways a little bit. That's kind of something we might see a little bit in terms of teamwork to try and get yourself in a proper pace with this kind of a race. Part of that too, look at the cars that are building up behind them. Niskanen, Narajo, Vareski are still now reeling them in fairly quick. They've reeled in about a second lately. At the same time, Mick has had some trouble.
Yes, he's parked alongside the side. I did notice a 991 Cup car that was very slow in that section. So this is Eric Mickey as a 9191 car comes to the inside. He tried to take the curbing away, and that is going to happen 100% of the time. That MX-5 car does not have the ability to take that corner any other way. You can see that 991 Cup car come on through. Now, Eric Mickey, he's already had to use his fast repair, so hopefully the damage on that machine isn't too significant as he goes down the Donner Hill, but that's unfortunate for him, getting kind of picked out of the crowd as we're seeing the 911s, the 991s, excuse me, go into the first corner. João Valverde and Riley Thompson, and they take that quick left-hand switch back. And these 991 Cup cars will continue, and really these Cup cars, they're not as technologically advanced as the GT3 cars, but they are very, very similar to Speed Bracket, and it is the 911 GT3 Cup car. So either it's 991 or a 911 or a 919, or, well, it's not a 919. It is some variation of ones and nines, as of course Porsche nomenclature demands that every single vehicle must have a significant number of nines followed by ones. But regardless to that, Justin, these cars aren't as advanced as a GT3 car, but with them being in a similar bracket, they are putting down some very quick lap times.
Yes, they definitely are, and it's not just the value of nines and ones mixed into those said times that they've been recording so far, are for some of them, as we'll go up towards the Kias as well at the same time. As Cam says on our side, it's Danish time, as right now some of those drivers try and have what's some Danish food that I can reference here? A Danish position, I don't know. Hungry for a position? Bacon, I guess? Is that Danish?
Thing?
I think.
I don't know.
It can be a thing.
It can be a thing.
Let's get to race cars, though. Gruber, though, you can see he is... I believe he's actually lost a said spot, but you can tell he's trying to get the spot back and looks to be just following the tire tracks. A little bit less mistakes from him compared to the driver in front, who is going off in the rumble strips and not handling the bumps as well, it appears. Meanwhile, if we can, let's cut away from this because trouble Joshua Wolf's group. Joshua Wolf has slammed into a bunch of other drivers in a mix of a group of 4 or 5. A couple different drivers ping-ponged into the grass in that said group, and Joshua Wolf has lost at least 4 or 5 seconds. This is why. You can see the door slam from Joshua Wolf there, Cam. Able to still save it. The driver in front, not as lucky. That was one of the, I believe, the TDR machines.
Yeah, that's what it looked like to me, as Joshua Wolf manages to, again, have a bit of entertainment unfold in front of him. He seems to be having already quite an interesting day, as we'll go to the pair of the kinetic racing machines here, as these 911 Cup cars. It is certainly going to be, as we're watching with Gabriel Ruse and Christian Chandler, these are, of course, your leaders. They're going to go around Claude Belval, and will they get caught out? Nope, they will not. So Gabriel Ruse is able to go right on through as they almost basically shoot the gap between a couple of MX-5 machines before they will get to Dirk Fetterman, which they will technically be unlapping themselves, even though they're going to be driving by fast enough to wave a hand, and that's about it.
Just still following with the kinetic drivers real quick. Want to give a quick update as well with that incident. We've seen David H. Baker has had to take a tow truck because of damage from said incident, so we have at least another driver off the racetrack at the moment. But with these cars, again, it's getting to where it's a bit more teamwork once again, with the drivers trying to stick together, try and manage the traffic together, because sometimes you want to have a friend around you when you don't know what to expect up the road, and you don't know if there's, say, a driver in front of you that is not a said teammate that will end up trying to use another driver as a pick in front and sacrifice you in the expense of them gaining time on them.
Most certainly, and that can always come with a degree of incident, as we're seeing a replay here of Jamie Rushworth, that CQR club, but boy, oh boy, does Jamie go for a ride there. He ends up, I think he just kicked a little bit of the rumble strip there. No, he, as they'll go under braking, will he hit that rumble strip on the left? No, he hits it on the right. With these Kias, they're very stiff machines, and you end up popping those Armcos. You end up popping the rumble strips, which then does involve popping of the Armco barriers afterwards. But for Jamie, he's not going to be happy about that one, as he's now on pit lane.
Yeah, after he started to try and get back going, he had to take a tow truck. His car is destroyed at the moment. Riley Thompson has also just DNF'd from the race all of a sudden. So one of the top contenders in the series season is done for the day. That was after he slammed the Armco barriers just about 1 minute ago. You'll see right here, he was 37th overall for the time being, and he was trying to get towards a pass. He already had damage. You see that little bobble? That little rumble strip hit, sends the car around, and says bye-bye race car.
I'm surprised there's nothing up there, so I'm presuming either it was radiator damage or suspension damage, and once you're already cycled back, perhaps you need to move back. But meanwhile, we've got the 535 machine trying to get through. That's Edu Vila trying to get through these MX-5 cars. Now, it's going to take a while for these Porsche machines to catch up to the Kias, but the MX-5s come quickly, as Edu Vila will end up being able to maneuver past Kurt Crum and Darwin Mance without too much of an issue, as he's trying to chase down Thomas Pedersen, the number 7 Porsche. But right now it does seem like things are at least outside of some very dramatic incidents. Most of them have been self-made incidents outside of a couple tags, but for the most part, we've had actually a fairly decent and clean run so far out of the 3-4 laps that we've had.
Yeah, on lap 4 of 14, technically, the timer down to 2 hours, 22 minutes on the dot right about now. But there's still a lot of pressure right now. Those Kias, for example, they are currently about, give or take, from the race lead, about 7 minutes back at the moment. 6 minutes away from getting positions on those MX-5s. For the Porsches, they're going to still have to hit their marks for at least 19 plus minutes. At the moment, a huge difference in time. David Berkol leads those Kias. Matthias Magnussen still following the tire tracks. They pulled away from the next grouping of cars. That involves Klassens, Gruber, and Harad at the moment. David Berkol, of course, as I hit on about a little bit, is of course one of a very underrated driver, I think you have to say, on the road course side of things. And we're seeing some of that talent here today again. You see it, say, in a NASCAR truck and some of the road course series that go that way, and other types of race cars, and you're seeing his teammates also following along the similar sort of pace today.
Yeah, most definitely, and really the whole of the Torque Freak Racing group have been in the major series for quite some time. It's always a great challenge, I think, for a multitude of different teams. They want to come here, they want to challenge themselves, as we're on board with Mad right now, Pete Herod, as he is currently chasing down I believe that is George Gruber, that it is, as he closes on up under braking, but there's just nothing you can do through this quick left-right switchback before you set yourself up, and that's the final corner on the right. But we don't take that, we go take a left and head our way onto the Nordschleife. As we know, as currently it is a 3-car Kia train, as Tim Klassens is still ahead of George Gruber, his teammate.
And real quick, to mention the Team Mad Machine, they are running a part of the Team Sport classes. Big chaos in front of them. That, I believe, might have been Klassens hitting the wall there that caused a bit of a check up there. They still keep going, but let's see what caused that one.
Looks to me like he hit the rumble strip, popped up the right side of that machine, straightened it out, pinballed off the Armco. He's extremely lucky to have that happen. I don't know if he has suspension damage or at the very least knocking that entire wheel hub out of alignment. But right now, George Gruber really wants to get on by, and so does Pete Herod.
And you can see them trying to dice their way on as Klassens goes off in the grass. It might be suspension if that's the case, as he lets by the spots go, as Klassens loses 2 spots.
Yeah, just like that. It's pretty obvious that he's got at least some steering camber issue, so he'll have to probably come in and take his fast repair unless he can handle it. And we do have, virtually, basically a nobody, but he at least knows a little bit about the machine itself, Justin, a guy by the name of Paul. He's, I don't know if he can spell Kia, but I'm presuming at the very minimal, it's you part of the CQR team, or is it the Mad team? I never remember. There's just so much anger. There's always so much anger in the Kia team names that I never remember which one Paul is a part of. But we can at least, Justin, bring our resident Kia expert in to talk about driving these cars around, as George Gruber decides to go an excursion 2.0 off track, and he will have to stop his car that allows Pete Herod to get by, as well as Tim Klassens.
I'll tell you what, guys, it is really difficult to run around this track in the Kia. It is a tricky car to handle. You have to run the rear wing so low on this car that the back end around the Nordschleife gets really loose, and it's so easy to make a mistake. And as you've alluded to, Cam, touching the majority of these curbs is basically asking for your car to be damaged in a significant way. And that hit that we saw Tim Klassens take on his car, I wouldn't be surprised if his steering is damaged in some way.
Yeah, we've been seeing how he's been struggling, as well as now his fellow teammate that seems to also have not as much damage. But it seems like he's starting to struggle a little bit himself. He does have that front bumper really bounced around and in. It looks like that suspension's really taking some hard bumps as well. What do you feel about that in terms of, I believe it's Gruber I'm referring to, that's trying to fall behind Clausen's with a little bit of a better suspension than that driver than what we're seeing with that left front of Clausen's?
Well, I mean, you can look in that corner there. That's where the big damage is on the car, and he's really going to be struggling for top speed, is Tim. And he's also going to be struggling with the steering, as I mentioned earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised if David E. Baker in the CQR club car does end up coming up behind. And Cam, do you want to stay on this broadcast after those comments that you made earlier? Because I can actually remove you if you want.
Where's the lie? Where is the lie?
Well, the fact that you said I was with CQR, but anyway.
I asked the question. It was a question. It was a legitimate question. I'm surprised you didn't answer it. Is it Mad or CQR?
It's Team Mad I'm with.
Yeah,
so I
see,
am
there you
biased, so
go.
I do apologise, everybody. I am a bit biased, but there you go.
As unbiased as ever.
Lots of fun here with 2 hours and 16 minutes on the clock. Also having fun with these MX-5s that have been battling for second and third the entire way so far. They are currently 6 seconds back of Fetterman. The question is, how long is that going to stick? You're currently trying to follow along the tire tracks again at Beauval. They've gone back and forth, it seems, almost every single quarter of a lap, it seems, with using the draft, getting runs. You'll see the example here for Jurg trying to get a bump draft, and that bump draft actually hurt him this time.
Well, I will say sometimes it looks like it hurts him, but it's actually very helpful. And you will see in just a few moments' time, if we stay on board here, Franco Scurry and the 99111 Porsche will end up coming by on, well, he's trying to pick out whether the left or the right, because that is a legitimate bump draft right there. Do not think that that isn't a strategy here in these MX-5s. What I was going to say is that what happens is that you transfer your energy here as we're diving down to the inside, and you should see an MX-5. Okay, we're just going to completely avoid. That's actually a really good camera work to completely avoid Claude Belval. I'm actually impressed. As Franco Scurry is happy as a clam. He's finally able to get by these two guys. But for Juri Jurg, I have to say, I mean, it is a matter of throwing too much kinetic energy into your opponent's car to where he can't control the car going into braking, and you end up getting him out of rhythm, and you're able to get by.
Here, quickly looking at replays that lets on by. At the same time as you're explaining that, if we can reel back just a slight touch, right here, you'll see Vorosky take a hard hit. That's more than a slight touch. That is a tow truck for him.
Yeah, most definitely. That looks, yeah, that is not a, nope, Trevor, that car's not doing good. We're seeing here what has happened as just the weight transfer onto the suspension got loose, and rather than taking the spin, he self-corrected, and unfortunately for that Mazda, that day is pretty much going to be done. He's going to have to take that one to the pits. Eric Mickey, by the way, has turned into an official retirement, by the way, and he's obviously very high up the point standing, so that is going to be a big one for him. However, I will say, after 40 minutes of racing, Dirk Fetterman is still rocking and rolling.
That can still change in a variety of reasons. There's 10 laps to go in the race for one. Two, we just seen a change for 16th overall now. David E. Baker, as Paul predicted, able to make a pass, and now is trying to pull on away compared to the two damaged cars. Will either of them use a fast repair? No, they are not. So both of them are going to tough it out for the rest of the fuel run, it looks like, and then maybe potentially use it. There is a driver that is in the Kias coming in. It is Magnussen coming in. He does have some damage on his car, and we're going to have to double check to see if this is a strategy move or if it is an incident already. He was, again, falling in the tire tracks of David Barriclough.
Yes, and I think that this is off strategy right here. I don't think that's a damaged situation. Right now it is David Barriclough, Pete Herod, and then you've got this this trio of David Baker, Tim Claessens, and George Gruber. And I have to say, David Baker, well, David E. Baker, you have to specify because both of the David Bakers are here. There is David H. Baker and David E. Baker. So when somebody points that out, we're going to have to clarify. But they are in different classes, though. We can say Kia Dave and MX-5 Dave. As it looks to me like George Gruber was trying to get around his teammate Tim Claessens, and I don't know if I'm fully in support of making moves here, because unless George is that much faster, I don't see the effort of basically letting David E. Baker get away.
There's a problem with that argument of saying Dave Kia and whatnot Baker, as driver into sand goes Tim Claessens. Words are tough. That was also a tough corner exit. He loses a spot again with said steering issue. Meanwhile, the MX-5s that are in that grouping don't want to work around, currently trying to work on by Niskanen. Niskanen had been the lead car of that group, forth on back for a little bit. He does have damage, and it looks like that's causing problems now for Niskanen.
Yeah, and Niskanen has been working strong in that MX-5. Honestly, I wonder if this is new damage or old damage. I'm presuming this is new, and we're going to see why here as Niskanen has taken a...
No, it is old damage because about 30 seconds before this, about maybe 20, Niskanen hit the right side Armco after hitting the rumble strips, damaged the right rear suspension, and in turn... that led to the overtake that happened a few corners afterwards. This was after he was actually starting to pull away a little bit, it seems. You'll see a little bit in just a couple moments on your race spot replay because he hits the rumble strips on the left, hits the wall on the right, adds some damage. That led to the overtake you've seen in a few moments after that.
Yeah, that is so easy to do. And these cars, we have to remember, they are getting light. Not super duper light, but we have to remember this is a 16-mile racetrack. Correction, a 16.12 mile racetrack. You're basically going to be running a standard MX-5 fuel tank. I believe it's up to 13 gallons, 11 gallons, 11.9 gallons. So what ends up happening is you are going to be running, say you're getting 10, 15 miles to the gallon. So you're going to be basically burning off a gallon of fuel a lap in a way, if not more, which means that is going to be weight coming off of the rear. When you have your car completely set up for weighted run, it becomes a bit of a hassle as that fuel burns off, as Kurt Crum and Darwin Mayance both pulling into pit lane.
So a couple drivers trying strategy. Meanwhile, Jurg able to get another pass done for second again. Jamie Rushworth, who is out back on the racetrack, also breaking things up. But as you mentioned, some of the MX-5s are coming in because of the gallon a lap, I believe you just mentioned. If they pit in right now, they can try and make... Yeah, and they can make it to the end. Plus, I think the reason they're taking tires is if they don't plan to pit again, you want to have the freshest tires you can for trying to stretch it as long as you can, don't you think?
Yeah, I most definitely. And I mean, when we were talking about fuel runs, they're not going to be coming in every 4 laps like the Kias are. This is as far as racing cars go, this is basically an economy car with a fuel tank the size of small countries. In relative terms to how everyone else's fuel containment systems are. You have to remember, this car can run for basically, look, Darwin Mayance, if he so chooses, won't have to pit again. He's going to be running basically 2 hours in that car, so that is in relative terms to other race cars, whereas some cars that people like for some reason end up running out of fuel on the 5th lap because the thing can only hold 4 laps of fuel, not specifying any names or car manufacturers. But I'm just saying, in relative terms to racing cars, the MX-5 does it's kind of a fuel sipper, as it were, right?
I agree with you on the fuel sipper part. I don't agree with being able to have fuel equivalent to the size of small countries, because if you had a fuel tank the size of a small country, I believe you can have enough fuel to go around the world, potentially, maybe. Because I'm pretty sure one of the small countries would be a couple miles in size for a fuel tank. if I'm thinking the way you're trying to describe this. The MX-5s are currently still having drivers duck in, mind you. And meanwhile, as this has all been going on, the gap between now the Kias and the last place MX-5 at the moment is down to 2 minutes. However, Barraclough and a lot of the Kias still have to come in, potentially at least a couple times today.
Well, I mean, it is basically a 3-hour run, but they started with 2 hours and 45. So really, it's basically going to be 3 pit stops if you're going to be coming in. As Travis Henderson is able to beat his teammate Trevor Vovorski, as everyone is basically starting to come right on in the MX-5s, which is kind of surprising in a way. But I will like to see if we can head out to our 911s and see what we got going on in that world. As right now, Christian Chanier is rushing right now to try and break that gap still over Gabriel Reese, but he's just not able to do it.
To answer the question of what is the exact name of the car, it's the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup 991 in brackets, the 991 part. So both numbers are technically correct with that. But again,
It's fine.
To get to your point, though, with Challenger, he was about last time by nearly a tenth quicker than the driver trying to track him down. So he's slowly gaining time. It looks a bit smoother on the corner exit so far. He's just not been able to pull away in that Radicals machine.
No, he really isn't. It's I think we see the Radicals machine. However, I think the people at home are seeing a pair of kinetic cars, which is certainly not made my life for me more difficult, as I think they just, I was about to say, I think they just got a little bit of error. That couldn't have been Flute's pause, was it?
I believe that was some error in that said section.
No, it wasn't. That's between Brunchen and Sprungheidel.
And hello, that's of course difficult to try and control when a car turns into an airplane.
I mean, it's there is a notable absence of downforce as far as a modern day racing car goes that is meant to go very, very quickly. There's a notable lack of downforce, and that's to really put the car into the driver's hands, mechanical grip, rear mounted engine, etc., etc. So when the car does get airborne, there's really not a lot. It is something that is attainable and possible here, as we're going down the Dottner Hill right now with Christian Chalnier, and this is going to be important because we're going to see if Gabriel Roos will get the overspeed. Now, it's interesting, the MX-5s, they're basically bullets. The Kias, same thing. They're able to draft right on up. The Cup cars don't seem to be capable of doing the same thing, as they are basically running the same speed, maybe 1 to 2 mile an hour difference, which is impressive, I would presume. Because I would have thought that Roos would have just sucked right up to the rear of Chalnier.
Meanwhile, the Kias are into the pit lane for their scheduled pit stops, as they've ran about 4 laps, give or take, on the racetrack, as they'll all stop to get their fuel in front of their said paddocks. One driver does overrun their stall. That was George Gruber. Also running over the stall is Bram Reniers. He'll lose a couple of tenths of a second. But still, the Porsches and the MX-5s can still make it a longer amount of time. Of course, their estimated pit window, as we talked about, just 1 total stop expected for today's race.
Yeah, it's kind of the tale of 2 economies. So we've got the battle between Jurg and Claude Belval still going on. Your overall race leader is Dirk Fetterman. No, I'm not kidding. He is the MX-5 driver of Dirk Fetterman. He is currently leading right now. That is because we are running what's called the Predator Split. Yes, there are no classifications of cars. It's just everyone's running together. The MX-5s all went out. A couple of minutes later, the Kias all went out. A couple of minutes later, all the Porsches went out. We'll potentially see everyone kind of balance out their lap times towards the end of this 3-hour event. But I will say that this duel right here is for the 2nd position overall in your MX-5s as they work their way around this this exceedingly lengthy circuit.
On board still with Belval, as you see the speeds, only 102 miles per hour, trying to blip the throttle and tap the brakes to make sure they don't run into the grass, because as you've seen, grass is death. Bare rumble strips are death. Armcos are absolute death today for a race car. And Belval's trying not to, of course, not risk anything, of course, because this is, of course, while a Predator race, it's an endurance Predator race. You need a race car to make it to the checker flag to be able to survive said Predator attack.
That's right. And I mean, couldn't we transport all of these machines and let's go to Bristol, Tennessee, and we'll do a Predator race there with these ones. I think that'd be fine. Would they, Paul? Could the Kia even theoretically make the turn at Bristol? Like, is that something that's not logically possible?
Now, you may mock and laugh at the Kia, but I'll have you know that we used to do some oval racing in that car, and it is unbelievable on the oval. Yes, it does. It does understeer a little bit, but the draft that you get from that car is absolutely incredible. So you get some great pack racing around ovals. So I wouldn't miss it. I know Bristol's not really a draft track, but it's banked turns. It should be fine.
It should be fine. And also, of course, out of the people here, somebody might have owned a 2014 Kia Optima, which is, of course, modeled here. I don't know who. Maybe it would be David Haynes. Don't know why I would think of that name, but, you know, I just comes to mind.
Yeah, that is an interesting analogy to bring in. Why don't we bring in David? He just so happens to be here. David Haynes will be joining us for the next 2 hours and just was a part of SimSpeed's coverage of the international region for today's Predator races for the Major Series. David, welcome to the broadcast. That's a great welcome.
Exciting. That was absolutely some of the best Australian commentary I've ever heard.
Well, we'll work on the apparent technical issue with David for the moment. He is currently fixing said issue at the moment. But, of course, he was a part of that coverage for the international split. Of course, there is also the Americas split coming up on GSRC at the end of the day at about 8 p.m.-ish Eastern Time, about 5 p.m. Los Angeles time. We're still following one of the MX-5s as they sort themselves around still with the different strategies. The drivers for the Kias have also come out of the pit lane as well.
Here comes Jory Jurga into pit. No, he tried to psych out Claude Belval. I thought he was going to come in.
It looks like they were trying to maybe think, why not go off strategy, try and force them into an off strategy situation. Instead, they're going to stick together, try and separate themselves out, and not going to trick them. They're still 10 seconds back, mind you, and you still only have 5 MX-5s that have not pit. Fetterman, Berval, Jurg, Duranjo, and Volstro are the ones who have not pit. Then after that, you have the MX-5s that have pit. Krum, Nintz, Niskanen round out the top 8. Now let's bring in David now as he's got everything up here sorted out here. A heck of a race so far. How's this comparing to the international race that you were a part of earlier on in the weekend?
I'm definitely feeling like, well, we've had some attrition for the Kias so far in this event. They're definitely a much better chance at being able to snag an overall win here than they were last time. And really, it's far too early as we're watching some of this MX-5 action. Far too early to have any clue. Will it be an MX-5? Will it be a Porsche? Will it be a Kia that takes line honours here? It's looking very good. I'm enjoying it greatly. And of course, there's that huge difference in the fuel economy between these Mazda MX-5s and those thirsty Kias.
Would you imply that, in relative terms, the MX-5 fuel tank could be considered the size of a small country?
Yes, certainly. Who would have known that a highly strung race car turbocharged engine would chew through a lot of fuel, and these little naturally aspirated 2 litres in the Mazda MX-5s, they sip it a little bit more carefully.
Right? See, that's what I'm saying.
I've kind of seen it as you trying to say the country like Denmark can fit into a fuel tank. Am I understanding this wrong?
Can you not put the entirety of Denmark inside of a fuel tank?
The Kias can only last 45 minutes, by the way, in terms of the fuel tank. So
that's why.
Yes. I've completely lost my train of thought.
Can I try and bring a sense of order to this broadcast here, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, please.
Because I just want to make this final point before this degenerates any further than this. These different cars have been built to different regulations. Therefore, they last as long as they can on the fuel that they're regulated to for their series. Anyway, back to the action, because Michael Blake has had an accident.
Yes, so he's not been able to keep order to his car. Let's take a look here at what happened, because one of the Team Mad machines have more bad luck. He's now 25th because you see that little bump on the rumble strip starts to get a little over rotation. He kept the car going after that, but then it still hooks.
Oh, and then he just stopped into the Armco barrier. That is, and he parked the car.
As that went on, let's take a look at a second replay of that incident, because it started off with that little rumble strip. The car never seemed to get fully settled and ended up hooking around to the right into the Armco. At that same time, we're showing that David H. Baker had his second crash of the day today, to the point where he's no longer got a front hood, front bumper, or proper steering. He slammed the Armco heading towards Donninger Ho in his MX-5. In fact, on the corner entry into the Donninger Ho, as you'll see on board here, if we can. It's going to be right after this right-hander. You'll see about right as he gets into the Armco towards the right side of the racetrack, I believe.
Yeah, just loses the the weight starts transferring. It rolled off the suspension. The weight just kind of rolled off of that left side suspension, which means that the car kind of does a wiggle. It has to straighten out. That weight has to go somewhere because it's at the limit of the suspension, so it kind of throws the car a little bit off, and you start chasing it, and you end up getting behind. And David Baker, as you can see, is taking what I would consider the very standard, very normal line that a completely broken racing car that still has its headlights will take. As I will say, it does appear, at least from my perspective here, that MX-5 engine is actually, seeing as we've been able to peek inside actually, you know what, this is good, because Michael Blake is on pit lane, and David H. Baker is just getting on pit lane. Let's see if they pass each other, and compare the size of the engines, because I'm almost going to say that the MX-5 engine is just about the same size as the Kia motor, but of course, the Kia motor does that whole turbocharged, malarkey. Now they won't get anywhere near each other. But I will say, for David Baker, I'm hoping that he did not use his fast repair. As we're seeing George Gruber, I'm pretty confident he just locked out the suspension going into the air as George Gruber tries to lock on down. And Justin, I think it is a bit, as I'm looking at my watch, getting to be about that time.
Yes, indeed. It's getting to about that time where I believe you are a part of course, you were a part of a great and interesting broadcast for the first hour, to say the very least. Still a ways to go here. The reason why we're looking at Gruber and his group, though, we'll see the race replay about here, I believe, because you see Gruber on the right side of the racetrack and losing a bunch of time, in fact, afterwards. It might have been a money shift, maybe, based on the speed we've seen afterwards. Let's check it one more time.
He absolutely pounded that inside curb through Plants Garden on the left-hand side. Look at this massive, massive air for the Kia. Oh, nearly rolled it even, and of course had to lift out of the throttle, put him offline. So I believe this is Stefan Baloff S here, and we've seen drivers come to grief over the curbing there. You can't keep the car flat, throttle pinned if you're offline through that difficult sequence of high-speed corners.
Can I just butt in here and say that's my normal line through there in VLN races?
That's why people ask you to produce.
And yet I'm the bad guy. And yet I'm the bad guy. All right, whatever, that's fine. I will say, I was surprised, Justin, that George Gruber wasn't able to close in on the rear of Diego Hormilia through the drafting there.
Well, it seems like they're starting to get about even, mind you. He does have a bit of that front bumper damage, mind you. It also doesn't help to try and get the draft together when you hit that rumble strip to be able to pull back. He did gain some of it back, but at the stripe right now, they're separated by about 4 car lengths. Right now, these drivers that you're following along with Gruber is 6 minutes, 55 seconds back of Dirk Fetterman. And there's a chance by the end of their fuel window they might be able to reel in some of the MX-5s even after their pit stops. Behind that as well, too, you've got Reniers that has been able to jump by Clausen's. Remember, Reniers actually overran his pit stall a little bit, along with Clausen's, I believe, and has now been able to actually pass on by him after Clausen's had to get some of his damage repair with the fast repair. At the same time, in our Torque Freak Racing machine in the Porsches, and Joshua Wolf is still chugging in 28th spot, trying to make a pass on Valverde. They have been near side by side, off and on for the past lap.
Valverde is an extraordinarily quick driver. We have to remember Joshua Wolf had lost a couple of positions due to a bit of off-track excursions, and this is we've managed to get it back on the rails, folks. So I believe now I'm going to go buy out and take care of Race Spot Baby, because Race Spot Baby needs to be taken care of. But either way, I will say thank you, David, for coming in here and also being rude to Paul, as that's a very, very essential part of broadcasts, as we know, as Joshua Wolf is getting extraordinarily close to João Valverde. And, of course, thank you to Paul for producing in a pinch, of course. But we will, of course, see you all next time. And Justin, thank you. And it's been a great first hour of racing. And I have to say, out of all of it, I really am a fan of this format. And I'd like to see this more in the future.
Absolutely. It's been an exciting race so far, etc. here today. Thank you very much for joining us for the first hour, Cam. And of course, one thing I do want to mention, family, of course, overcomes a lot of different things. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Cam.
Oh, I'll try. I'll probably be sitting here. It's just the problem is, well, if I were to try talking and then we heard babies crying, I mean, that might be what we normally do in post-race interviews, but I don't think we would want that in the broadcast.
Okay, Cam Walsh, everybody, joining us for the first hour. David Haynes, of course, with us for the next hour and 50-plus minutes. Paul Smith also with us here today in the broadcast booth as Cam goes to take care of his children. Right now, Joshua Wolf wanting to not give a little too much grief to Valverde. He has had a bit of grief himself in terms of getting bounced off the Armco barriers, but he's trying to gain back as much time as he can here, growing near the back end of the grid at the moment.
Exactly, we're watching 27th and 28th overall, but they're 3rd and 4th of the Porsches, and with a great chance of being able to gobble up a lot of Kias and a lot of Mazdas later in the race. So they're fighting each other, but if they're smart, as they go through Kesselchen, they'll know that they're not just racing against each other, but effectively they're racing against all the other different cars out there as well. You can see how much he feels like he's being held up by Valverde, though, especially through Mut Curve there. I have a track map, can you tell? And yeah, so right underneath the rear wing of that other Porsche, the 3rd and 4th of the Porsches in those positions overall, though.
You see them sort themselves still single file with Valverde up in the front position of the two drivers. But there's not really many passing zones in especially the sector 2 of the racetrack, you can really say. We've seen it where drivers have had to be single file, try and follow the tire tracks, not make mistakes, not hit the rumble strips to try and set themselves up for those said passing zones like Dodger Ho, we've talked about a few times today. We've seen some runs through some of the stronger corners, and in turn some of the pressurized mistakes in, say, heading down into the front stretch into turn 1.
Yeah, no doubt. Very, very difficult lap. Attrition out there has been huge. And Joshua Wolf needs to be patient. But this section here from the carousel, basically all the way to the Dottingahur, it's not an overtaking spot. He's still just waiting in line, potentially being held up, potentially costing him positions later in the races. With Kias, with Mazdas, he could pass if he gets free.
Absolutely, you can see them continue to go back and forth. They are currently somewhere around Bruchgen at the moment, and in fact, leaving that section, heading to Flensgarten here as I speak with my German. I don't even know where I'm going with this point. The drivers, though, know where they're going. It's across the racetrack. At the moment, that is not where you want to go into the grass and against the right side curbs. That's going to lose about a tenth that section.
Yeah, Wolf got put offline through the crest. He didn't have it all set up. We'll get a replay of what that's happened. He was already a little bit out of shape there. And then this corner just up here, he's looking right underneath the rear wing of Josh Wolf. Misses the apex, goes wide, teeny bit on the grass. Clops a lot of curb. That's upset Joshua Wolf just a little bit. It also compromised coming out of Galgenkopf towards Dodingerhua. He won't get the run he wants at Joao Valverde this time by. One thing to point out for these Porsches is that I think they are one lap away from being able to pit and fuel and get to the end. I think they're just entering their pit window.
Yeah, they are approaching what is technically halfway in the race. It's still technically lap 8 of 14. However, the reason we're not mentioning the laps as much and more so the time is the lap times differences. Right now, the best time right now for the MX-5s has been Fetterman, a 9 minute 58 seconds. Compare that to the cars you're looking at in terms of their class. 8 minutes 30 seconds is the average time for the drivers. The best of them are in the 8:26s. So a minute and a half at least faster a lap, while the Kias are about a minute faster than those MX-5s that are currently still technically in the lead on top of your board.
Yep, so our leader, Dirk Federman, has completed 7 laps. These Porsches that have just come across the line here, Christian Schellner, Gabriel Rus, Joao Valverde and Joshua Wolf, have now completed 6 laps. So they are 1.5 laps behind those Mazdas, and they've got to catch all of that up in the remaining laps they have.
Again, we're going to show those laps again on the upper hand corner now instead of time for the time being to show this. Again, it's technically at the halfway point in terms of the lap times. But in terms of where we are on the clock, there's a strong chance with that it may be close on the checker flag lap to reach said time for the 3-hour limit. Huge lockup though on your screen. That's going to light up those tires heading towards the pit window.
Yeah, precisely. You lock up your tires, you put a little bit more heat into them, and then they can fall away. You can lose a lot of grip. Now the track temperature is not too hot. It's 23 degrees Celsius. That's something in Fahrenheit. I don't care. But yeah, so it's not a particularly hot track out there. Pretty grippy conditions overall. We're looking at some of these Kias because they've clumped together through Kleinis Carousel. Tim Clayson's, Diego Jimenez Hormilla. I think that has changed positions. Tim Clayson's has, in the 451 car, has managed to get his way in front.
Yes, indeed it has, because Gruber passed by him about the first half of the course. He's now passed by Diego Jimenez Hormilla as well. As Paul, I think, is trying to bring up a second point on top of this movement, because this machine you're falling on board with has dropped 2 spots in the past half a track.
But this is where the slipstream will come into effect, though, and is really in the draft now. It depends on what wing different drivers are running as well, because some may be running a little bit higher wing to cope with the Nordschleife section a little bit better, but it looks like at the moment that Hormilla is just staying behind for the time being, and that might not be a bad idea, to be honest. If you can keep in the draft, you're going to save yourself a lot of fuel, and that'll save you a bit of time in the pit stops. And speaking of pit stops, by the way, Matthias Magnussen has come on to pit road for his second stop. Of course, he pitted early in this race.
And that was off cycle, mind you, so do you think that kind of strategy could work for Matthias Magnussen to try and mix it up to get away from the rest of the Kia contenders?
I personally would want to get the short final stop at the end of the race to get some fresh tyres on, because getting the fresher tyres on will help you. It's a significant advantage in the Kia around this track, our fresh rubber, and Joshua Wolf has actually changed position here.
And you're going to see why on your replay. Josh Wolf making the move on the left side. Actually got a little bit of air and got the better run and the better line to be able to force the early break of the car on the right side. Able to get by Valverde for position.
Yeah, that move had been coming for a little while. That's one of the highest speed sections of the track there from Flugplatz towards Arenberg. And it's a very, very sketchy overtaking place. Very fast left-hander. You come over the crest, and at those kind of speeds, it can be nearly impossible to go side by side. So in the end, they were safe. Where you can go side by side is on the Grand Prix circuit, and the Kia's proving just that. Bram Reiners keeps the tiniest of overlaps with his nose in front now. And they're side by side nearly 2 corners in a row now.
Reniers trying to get side by side. This continues a slide back by Hermilia. He was 4 seconds slower than Reniers that he's running side by side with as they head towards the Quick S, work their way through the NGK chicane and onto the main portion of the Northside part of the racetrack now with a tight left-hander. It seems like Hermilia is starting to really drop off. He did gain some spots in the pit window. However, it seems to be he's struggling to hold back the drivers that he's contending with, these Torque Freak drivers.
Yeah, compared to the guys that are around him, he pitted the lap earlier, means his tyres are a lap older. A lap here is 27 kilometers or so. That's an entire quarter of a stint for these cars, that his tyres are older than the guys he's racing. He had the advantage of the undercut. He had a lap where he had the fresher tyres, but now he's got the rest of his stint where his tyres are older than everyone around him. Tim Claeson's had that advantage, managed to get through. Now it's Bram Reiner's turn to use slightly fresher tyres, try and get past Diego Jimenez Hormilla.
And let's see if he can use those 1 lap fresher tires to his advantage here. You see the jumps up the hills for some of the cars. These ones don't leave the ground this time, but you can tell Renier's trying to back up a little bit for now to try and get the run towards where he can actually get to said passing zones here today. He's only in just the first part of the racetrack, mind you, entering the Arienberg, I should say, before they head down the Futtersor, before heading to the Adenau Forest, which is a quick S's. Reniers says, I'm ready for the spot now, and the quick right-hand banker able to make the move.
Yep, deep on the brakes, threw it to the inside, and now he has gotten himself through. Will try and pull out as much gap as he can. On the run down, there was a big instability for Hormilla, and just so very, very bold from Reniers to try and get through, but he forced the issue. Look, the rear gets unsettled on some of the bumps here, and you see the closing distance becomes massive. Over Schwedenkreuz, over the crest here, Reniers gets a better run, puts his nose towards the inside, comes from a long way back, comes in very deep, but just muscles his way through.
They actually make contact, as he's seen, and now he's trying to take off and away. As that went on, contact also happened with the Armco for Michael Blake again. He has taken his car back into the garage area after slamming the Armco around a few spots on back. You'll see why, and you see again, tire slide, and oh dear indeed.
That is such a tough braking zone because it's a sweeping left, a sweeping right. The track then has all these little sweeps in the braking zone here. You're braking and turning at the same time. If you come in a little bit too hot, then you see that slide, and it's just too late. Not enough tarmac left to slow it down. You can't brake in a straight line, and once the rear is upset, unfortunately, that was an accident that he probably knew was going to happen from quite a bit before it actually transpired.
And I believe he already used his quick repair potentially for an incident before, so we'll have to see what he decides to do from here on out. Also going on still is that back and forth that we've seen multiple times break out. Jurg and Burval have been going back and forth for the second and third spots overall for the drivers, and technically the MX-5 class. Should note there is no classes in this format, meaning this is for the overall position and for most points possible. Right now the top 8 is still currently MX-5s for Fetterman, Jurg, Berval, Naranjo along with Niskanen, Swaby, Krum, and Mintz. Then you have Volstroby and Henderson and Volarski behind that. And then outside that top 8 and outside the top 11 for where Volarski is, Barriclow is now down to under a full minute on the board and closing quickly for a chance to pass his first MX-5 for position on the circuit.
Yeah, Barriclow's on the lead lap, as it were now. You see that gap to the leader. He's got to close exhausts down, all of that, but he still is going to have to take 2 more pit stops, and we know how painfully slow the Kia's fuel with a fuel jug and how much pit stop time they have to take. He's still going to need to spend 2.5 minutes stationary on the pit lane. Some of the Mazdas he's coming up to catch have potentially already taken their stop and a fuel to get to the end. It's going to be a lot of work for him, but he has the horsepower and the straight line speed to potentially be able to put himself on the overall podium.
You want to talk about work? How about the fact that the Porsche still have to make up a full lap on the MX-5 still, as this has all been going on? Christian Challenger leads that group at the moment over Gabriel Rose and Joshua Wolf. However, it's going to still be a massive amount of time to gain up. 12 minutes is the amount of time from 1st to 24th at the moment where Challenger is, meaning he's still within 2 minutes away from the MX-5 leaders to be able to get technically on the lead lap in a cloudy part of the racetrack, where the Kias, they have a chance to gain positions in the sunny part of the racetrack.
Yep, watching on board with this Talk Freak Racing number 123, like we're on Sesame Street, of George Gruber. He gets a much better line here. He'll get the throttle open earlier. We've seen that this is such a difficult section for the Kias. Fast sweeping corners, lots of little crests and dips. All of those things strive to upset the car, and you run a little bit wide. The curbs will also bite you. This is such a committed high-speed section of the course. As they enter Schwalbenschwanz and then towards Kleines Carousel, George Gruber just needs to be patient, needs to set up a good exit onto the Dottinger Höhe, because we've seen in every single class, and there is no classes, but every single type of machinery we've got, the slipstream is incredibly powerful. You see the speed in miles per hour there. Well, the slipstream can definitely be worth 5, 8, maybe 10 miles per hour, even in these very, very slippery Kias.
Still following along board with Gruber here to see if he can get that slipstream now. He is lined up into the Dottinger Höhe. This time, currently this is again for 16 spot. They switched spots, I should say, before. And as you can see, they are trying to gain said spots for 15, 16, pardon me. Gruber, though, not gaining much speed overall. They're exactly dead even down to the end of the straightaway. 164 on the dot for both of the drivers. Not a single tenth gained by Gruber.
Is Gruber hitting the red limiter in the slipstream?
Look at this.
Has he set up the car for maybe for qualifying, maybe for solo hot lapping? And he might just not have enough gear. Paul Smith, you would know though.
Yeah, so what I suspect he's done is he's using the standard gear ratios rather than the long gears, and that means that he'll have better acceleration out of corners. However, it does limit him down the Dottinger Höhe, and that's exactly what we saw right there. So the other cars, they've probably gone for the longer gear ratio. It's not quite as good on corner exit, but that longer gear ratio actually helps you look after your tyres as well. So these guys, they'll have that slight edge over George Gruber here.
So my speculation becomes a fact there, Justin, which is always nice to hear that I'm not spouting absolute nonsense and it has some basis in fact.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was towards that way. When you mentioned that, I looked right at those lights that are above the steering wheel. You have some of them in real-life steering wheels for sim racing, and of course with the Kia, they have it on the car to know you're hitting that rev limiter without having to look down at your dashboard, etc. He's going to stay in line for now. The driver behind's not for position. That is Marcel Unger, who has had a nightmare of a race for himself. 35th position, has had to come into the pits a couple different times. It's already got damage on that Ward Here Art sponsored machine.
Yeah, I think he's actually the last car running out on track. So aside from retirements, basically dead last at this moment. Now, of course, he's a Porsche. There's still some other cars out there that are having a poor race in their class that he might be able to catch later on. But as it stands right now, the last car running is that number 71, Marcel Unger.
Should mention that we talked about a little bit about the one-lap undercut for Hermelia compared to some of his fellow competitors. He is now in and out of the pits, so the lead Kias could potentially be coming in this next time by for drivers such as Barrichello and so forth. He comes out in open space. And I kind of feel like that open space, even though it's a 27-kilometer distance about by the time we reach some more cars, on the tires, give or take, it feels like he is going to be able to pick up again more track position because he's not battling with fellow classmates like he had been before and like a lot of his fellow competitors are currently doing.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of track to himself, make his own focus. We've seen some mistakes happen when drivers are tucked up right underneath the bumper of the car in front. They lose their sight lines, lose their braking markers, lose some of their turn-in points and that. So he's got an opportunity right now to put in some quick laps and maybe have something to fight with to the end. But a great thing about the Nordschleife being such a huge lap is that we know with absolute certainty that it's exactly 4 laps that the Kias do to a fuel stint, which means we will expect Vavrovsky, Barraclough, Harrod, Baker, these guys, all of them to come into the pit lane this time. They cannot, it would not be physically possible for any of them to go much longer.
And as our Kia expert Paul Smith had noted between the both of us, they have to, of course, as you just said, come in this time by. For the fuel stint is exactly 4 laps for David E. Baker, again on the left side of your screen. On lap 9 of 14, still sorted out across the racetrack. The distance between the drivers on the lead lap, first to 23rd, 7 minutes. And the reason it's been difficult to reach for some of these drivers, the lead, Dirk Fetterman. I've talked a bit about him with Cam a bit, about the talent we've seen him in an MX-5 car. He's one of the best, if not the best, MX-5 driver in all of iRacing, and we're seeing again why. He is running 4 seconds faster every single lap, even compared to his own teammate.
Yeah, his last lap underneath 10 minutes. That is massively quick in the MX-5s, and you can see he's been doing that lap after lap. 9 minute 58, 9 minute 58, 9 minute 58. Fantastic consistency from Federman. We saw that he was on the 9th lap of his stint. MX-5s can maybe, in the right conditions, do 10. We might see a lot of the MX-5s in this time. Regardless, they're absolutely within the window, past the halfway point of the race, where they can pit and fuel to get towards the end. Challoner, that's your leader of the Porsches, puts himself onto the lead lap.
And that is the first time we get to say that for the Porsches today. They still have to make up a full 10 minutes on the racetrack. Challenger, Ruse, the first ones to drive on by. Still ways back, though, to the next Porsche in Joshua Wolf. Still 17 seconds back of that is still that battle, as we've been talking about. Dirk Fetterman, though, will bring in the MX-5 pit window and the Porsches. They are both coming at the same time.
There'll be a quicker pit stop for the Mazdas, I would imagine. One thing we're going to want to see with the Porsches, do they choose to take tyres or not? The Porsche GT3 Cups take fuel, and then when the fueling is done, then they can change tyres. The other types of cars, Kias and the Mazdas, can fuel and take tyres at the same time. In the background, you see Dirk Federman there getting the tyres changed, the car sort of cocked up on one side like a dog against a fire hydrant. So he'll be taking his pit stop, and it'll be quicker than the Porsches regardless. He'll get away just ahead of them. They'll have to pass him again. No, he won't, because there's no tyres for Challoner, but there's tyres for his teammate. Split strategy there.
And you can see him still on the jacks for those said tires right now. The main thought process, though, when I've seen this try and work its way around for a double stint on the tires, sometimes it works, sometimes it gains you net time. However, in other cases, we have seen that time in a lot of different series swing all the way back and then some in the other direction. How do you think this is going to work for Challenger compared to every other car that's ducked down so far taking tires in his class?
Well, I think he'll probably just get away with it because he's completed 8 laps. He's got 6 more to go. He's not asking a full stint of those tyres to get to the end. It's 2/3 a tank of fuel sort of thing. I think, especially with the cold track conditions, he'll just get away with it. But Barraclough deciding, I think, against tyres as well. The driver he was battling, Joao Valverde, does take tyres. So quick strategy, quick thinking from Joshua Wolf. My mistake.
Looking at Joshua Wolf right now, the
Getting
time
my torque freaks confused.
Yes, lots of torque freaks in this car, in the cars today, I should say. The time difference: Challenger 24 seconds, Wolf 27 seconds. The drivers that took tires 50 seconds on the dot. Compare that to, say, the Gruber, who is in the Kia car. That is still 16th. He still has to come in this time by first fuel window. He also has a giant dent on the front bumper now that may have added itself in as the Porsches were coming into said pits. It looks like much more stronger than there was on that front bumper before.
Oh, I love a yellow pen pointing out that that's not quite how the Kias leave the factory or are delivered to the teams. We'll get a good look at George Gruber. What does he know about setting up the Torque Freak racing car? What will he have for top end speed coming down the Dottinghur?
Should note the reason why he got the damage. Remember those jumps we've talked about? He ended up hitting a jump so hard that he slammed the ground and lifted up the front bumper and smashed that in the hood up. That's why he's got the damage. And we'll look on board now as he tries to shift up towards his top gears, currently at 153 miles per hour. Going to be able to also sling with the MX-5s, matching the speed of Tim Clausen's, in fact. And again, hitting the speed limiter, but faster is the difference, 166 for both of them. So they're starting to even out now compared to what they were doing before. He might be just out of range to actually make a move before that hits the max amount of speed that they have. 170 into the hard braking zone for the both.
Driver in front, Tim Claessens, has an MX-5 in front of him that's compromised him carrying as much speed into the braking zone as he would have wanted. That's let them get a little bit closer, but well, those will all stay out.
No pits. No pits. That was on lap 4, I believe, for them too, so it looks like they're going to be able to try and stretch it maybe. There is the potential, I do want to mention this, in endurance racing. Say you follow along your teammate and follow on their tire tracks and not make a pass. You can follow along with the drivers in front and run maybe 90-80% throttle. That can save sometimes up to a full lap if you do that for a full run. Do you think that might be something we might be seeing with Tim Clausen's and George Gruber if they're able to stay out this extra lap to try and stretch it? Because if they can stretch it, they don't have to come in any more times. They'll be able to come in just the once, if I'm counting this up right. Just the one more time, rather.
If these guys have really, really worked out their fuel consumption, then if a 14-lap race, if they can do 5, that saves them a pit stop. I'm really, really not sure about that. Now, this is the 24-hour layout of the circuit, not the VLN layout, which is slightly shorter. Does create a little bit of a difference in how many laps you can do on a fuel tank. If these guys are used to the VLN series, this isn't that layout.
You still see them go around this layout here at the moment. Paul Smith, of course, mentioning to us as well, in the VLN, for example, you can do 5 laps with a liter to spare. That is something to think about. They are at 5 laps to go. So, say they can come in, they'll have more than a liter to spare by far with those jugs for sure. Here, Paul.
Yeah, but the VLN uses a different layout.
Yes.
It's a shorter layout, so I do think that they're going to have to do a splash and dash. And here's where the strategy comes in. Do you take a full tank now and then just do a lap's worth of fuel? Or do you take, say, 3 laps of fuel now and then 2 laps on the next stop? That's going to be the interesting one, how the strategy's split here.
Joshua Wolf is in the pits, meanwhile, pardon me, and he's got severe damage. This was just around where the Porsches had pit. He slammed the right side and the left side walls, and you see him stopped on the racetrack about 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds prior. He was cutting through the grass hard through a right-hander.
Yeah, that's just after Adnauer Forst. I haven't seen precisely what happened to him, but you come up from Fuchsrohr, and it's a difficult braking zone over the top of the hill there. We'll get a different angle of it. So he's coming down the bottom of the hill. It's Foxhole or Fuchsrohr, which is the bottom of the hill. You come over this crest here. You need to brake just before you turn in over the crest. It's blind. He's hit the curb too hard, unsettled the car. He hasn't been able to slow it down, and it's the outside wall even before he got to Adnauer Forst.
And in turn, that means his car is destroyed and he's having to sit in the garage area. He did have a quick repair, I believe, still in supply. However, he was third for the Porsches at the time. That's going to definitely hurt him for the points after this one. With that said, situation for him off the racetrack already with under 5 laps to go.
Watching Claude Belval and Yuri Jörg, both of these guys pitted on the same lap. They're both on their out lap. They are both fueled, hopefully, to get to the end, but a huge difference in their pit stops times. Yuri, who's now behind, took, I think, 5-6 seconds more fuel than Claude Belval, and I think that has switched them in the pit stops, and now Yuri wants that spot back.
They've been back and forth the entire race, fighting like, well, cats and dogs. In a cat and mouse style race in this Predator format event. Jörg again on the right side of the track, trying to get the run again, though preferred line Burval on the corner exit. This has been something where you got to wonder what's going through these drivers' heads. They've lost at least, maybe, since they became just the two of them, about 13, 14 seconds. You're going to lose a second or two alone because he went above the banking in the corner, overran the corner, in fact.
The carousel, if you carry in a little bit too much speed, you can come unstuck from the preferred line, which is down there on the banking, and that's what I call the walk of shame. If you pop out of the banking and have to go around the high line, you can see it's cost him 2 seconds or more. He's just been a little bit too ambitious. The car hasn't stuck on the low line, and unfortunate for him. Live on to fight another day, but further back, some more great battles in the MX-5s.
And this has been still another one of those groups that have been back and forth a little bit too. The Bombshell Motorsports machines of Crum, Mintz, Lyndon Swaby also amongst that group. Last time by, he was in 6th spot, also now into the said 8th spot with some front end damage in that said group. They've been running the 10-minute, 3-second bracket the entire time and have been essentially tied together again for a majority of this race for their same group. Remember, Swaby was also part of that incident in lap 1. And actually had to come in a second time off cycle a little bit at one point.
Yeah, I'm also seeing Crum and Mintz as having been through the pit lane twice. So, a not ideal strategy or race for these guys, and they are prime candidates for being swallowed up by some Kias and Porsches later on. Luckily for Crum and Mintz, though, they're together and can work together, which is possible to do for the MX-5s, particularly with just a little bit of a bump draft on the Dottingahua.
Want to follow along with your favorite drivers? Be sure to go to racebot.tv/timing to follow along with the live timing of today's event for the major series for the European region today for round number 5 for the Nurburgring. 2.4 hours for this Predator race, because it's been a doozy one to say the very least, with these said drivers going back and forth in these kind of groupings today. But one thing to mention, about just under 20 seconds back, maybe 12 seconds in fact back now, is Barraclough to these drivers. There's also lap traffic that's about to come through in Thomas Peterson amongst the drivers that are slowly closing up to that battle we just showed.
Yeah, so Barraclough with 5 laps to go is getting very, very close to swallowing up some of those MX-5s, but those MX-5s have pitted and are able to get to the end from here. Barraclough, we imagine, will still need 2 more pit stops, potentially. If he's very, very lucky, he'll only need 1, but if he has to fill the tank on that Kia, that'll cost him 1:45 on pit lane. He's close to getting those MX-5s, but on pit strategy, he's effectively still 2 minutes behind.
He closed 2 seconds from the point you started that sentence to the point you ended that sentence. Jörg, meanwhile, from the point you started that sentence, drafted by for 2nd spot for Burval to the point you finish it. Also, an air driver having troubles. Another one went around. It's Swaby.
Watching what happened here, is that just a little bit too ambitious in Schwalbenschwanz? He's hit the outside corner. It's a corner I like to call Aaron's sector, and he's gone into the Armco very, very hard. It's a fast right-hander into a slower left-hander. I think he's carried too much speed through the first apex here. Missed the apex on the right, tracked out a little bit too wide, not able to slow it down for the left-hander, and the rear has also gotten loose, and he's rolled that Mazda. Very, very disappointing for him, because he was able to get a good result from there.
At that same time, Darren Mintz lost his tracking of his teammate because he overran his corner and slammed the Armco barrier on one of the quick left-hand banked corners. As you said, he missed the shelf this time, ends up having even more damage. Big hit on the right side.
Class carousel, little carousel again. Yes. In there, just not keeping it stuck down through the banking. It's popped out and then hit that outside Armco. Watching on board from here, and it kind of will tell its own story, really.
As our fans would say, that is Schwalbenschwaltz. That you've seen that happen just there. Meanwhile, David Barraclough just caught up to them and had to come into pit for what could be one of his final stops. He leads in the Kias as they all duck down, along with David H. Baker once more, who will pull his car back into the garage area. So this is that window we were talking about. 4 laps to go. This for them, some drivers are probably hoping this is going to be a potential last stop. If not, this could be a splash and go for the final lap or running out of the last lap itself in terms of fuel.
So I think potentially a strategy masterclass from a lot of these Kias who will be able to make it to the end from here. This will be their final stop. See the tyre change, of course, happening, and it's going to be a long hold, nearly 2 minutes to fill up those tanks. Paul, you're our Kia expert. Your thoughts?
Well, I just want to point out, so with our timing software, I think this is where we're getting that little bit of confusion. They are still only doing 4 laps in a stint, so they will need to do a quick, potentially a splash and dash. It's going to be a push. It's because it's counting 1 lap of the stint as they come into the pit line, because they cross over the timing line. So that's why it was showing 5 laps on that last one.
I'm glad you brought that up, Paul. Thank you very much for the clarification. You may have also seen a car just pop into the garage area. That is because that is Yuri's Perkilts, who crashed just as you were having an explanation, trying to pass by Yuri Jurg. You'll see why. Took the corner too wide to get around, misses a full corner, says hello tired.
That is huge on the start of the Hudson back. What a difficult crash. Very fast into the wall. Presumably just got distracted by the existence of that MX-5.
And now David Barraclough, as that happened too, is back out. So it looks like some of the attrition starting to build up. Lyndon Swaby has now pulled his car officially into the garage area as our 3rd official DNF of the race today, as there's still a lot more to go in this one. Barraclough currently sitting 6th at the time he crossed the stripe. He is currently in P11, 3 minutes back of Dirk Fetterman, but only 2 seconds back to the next position. You're about to see him try and pass on by Travis Henderson, who is running the same line through the Dunlop curb and heading towards Michael Schumacher S.
Yep, traction down, front wheel drive, gets past the MX-5 well and truly clearly. Huge horsepower difference there, more than twice the horsepower for the Kia, I think. So he's well and truly clear and away. Lead of the Kias.
And now up into the top 10 for the first time today. Officially on the track for Barraclough. He's got to again close up 3 minutes 4 seconds last time by. Before his pit stop, he ran a 9-minute 1 second lap time. That again is almost a full 2 minutes faster. Gap to the leader continuing to shrink, as you can see, with a massive difference in speed. The question is, can he do it cleanly and efficiently to be able to get the spots? Because now that there's only under 4 laps to go, it's going to be much more challenging to get the job done. And not just that, David, as well. You can't afford to make any sort of mistake, especially if your driver's even like Christian Challenger, who are still 6 minutes 55 seconds back.
Yeah, this Predator format, honestly, so unique, where Christian Challenger in this Porsche is really racing against Dirk Federman in the Mazda, and it's so much more difficult to calculate who is in theory winning, who is on the right track to take the class overall honors. It's difficult to say. There'll be, I believe, no, I don't know how many laps Christian Challenger is going to have to go when he crosses the line this time, but he is, you know, as you can see, just more than half a lap behind Dirk Federman. He's got to close all of that down in 4 laps.
Well, let's put it this way. Christian Challenger currently on what is cycled as his 10th lap. Leaders again are on lap 11 at the moment for the Kias and the MX-5s. So that is something that is to be still watched and still could lead to a lot of interesting moments here. Again, the official limit is technically 3 hours. The estimated time, as talked about a little bit by our members of the Major Series, a great community, of course, with this series. He's throughout the entire history of the iRacing community, really. Mentioning the estimated time, 2.4 hours for today, 2 hours, 40 minutes. There's still a lot that can happen. 3.3 estimated laps for Dirk Federman. Still a lot to gain up for Christian Challenger, who is currently running on his very lonesome because of that double stint on the tires he took compared to a majority of his competitors.
Yeah, and it hasn't hurt him too bad. He just did an 8-minute 27. His best lap is an 8-minute 26. So definitely the time he gained in the pit lane from not taking a new set of rubber, not really hurting him out there on track right now. Still cool track temperatures, partly cloudy, so it'll probably stay cool for the whole race. I think if you looked after those tyres in the first stint, that was a good strategy call that will give him a good opportunity of a good result, knowing that he's well clear of some of the Porsches, but he is still racing against a whole group of Kias and Mazdas, and he needs to have that in mind as well, not just, oh, I only need to be 1 second ahead of the next Porsche, which is Gabriel Roos.
Looking at the track information, the reason I think we're bringing this up is the track temp is the hottest it's been all day. Remember, we started more towards the high 60s to mid 60s track temperature wise, while the air temperature stayed the same. We have gotten slowly through towards what was around 7 a.m. local to about 9:42 local, 75 degrees Fahrenheit the track temp. So this is going to be the slickest the track has been. A car, however, has ended up biting the dust. It's Darwin Mintz, who is up as high as the top 5 today.
Replay on your screen how that's happened. He's coming in towards Bergwerk here, turns in. This is a corner where you need a very late apex. Has he gotten too much curb on the outside? A little bit of grass, upset the car with the throttle application, spins him around, nose first into the Armco, and you see how quickly that rearranges the front of his Mazda MX-5.
He already has fallen back to 26th place because of the tow truck. A bad break with this late to go in the race. Gonna make it very hard to even do anything. The leader in the Legends point standings, Burval, continues to hold on to the 3rd spot as this has been going on. But he has lost Yuri Jurg as that has been going on. So it seems as though some mistakes may have cost him some time. At 10:57 last time, at 10:58, it was this time by for Burval, where he lost 4 seconds to the man he's been with the entire day today.
Yeah, the last lap time for these MX-5s is of course slightly muddied by the fact that they were on pit lane. Their last lap was effectively an out lap, but you're absolutely right that Yuri Jurg, having gotten back through on Belval, now pulled that gap out a whole lot. The shortest pit stop time for the Kias was Claude Belval. Basically, I wonder if maybe he's got some concerns about did he take enough fuel to get to the end.
I mean, Burval had the faster time on the pit stop. Jurg was 5 seconds longer. Let's follow along, though, with the Kias that are on your screen. Gruber Clausen's on your screen. Last time by 11th and 12th. They're also trying to track in Pete Harad right now, who are also at the moment trying to track down Pete Vostro, who is the next MX-5 on the circuit. Again, these two, the teammates, have been together a majority of the run today. But they have just been having basically Tim Clausen's the lead car, Gruber now the back car between these two. Remember before he was working, pardon me, a little bit before with, I believe, yes indeed, it was that he was working with one of his other teammates in this race that is no longer on the racetrack at the moment.
Claesens had gotten past Humilla earlier, and now he's, I think, being closed down by Gruber. There's not been a whole lot to separate these two. They've pitted on the same lap. They're both on their out lap. So Gruber, again, going to be as close as he can, but I think we rode on board with him a previous time, and he was one of those drivers hitting the rev limiter on the Dottinghur, costing himself an opportunity there in a straight line to be able to get the pass done. He's going to need to sneak up on Tim Claessens later in the race, maybe use traffic as a pick if he's going to grab that spot away. Of course, they're racing each other, but it pays to remember in this Predator format that if they battle each other too hard and it costs them, 10 seconds of battling each other, and then they finish 5 seconds behind an MX-5, well, they're battling each other cost them positions to an MX-5 that they didn't realize maybe they were battling.
And that's a great point for sure in this one. Meanwhile, Magnussen has come into pit. Remember, he went off strategy in this race. He's coming in with 3 laps to go on the clock.
He can fill and get to the end from here, no doubt in my mind, regardless of how much of a fueled Meister he may or may not be. This is absolutely the point where it's possible to fit enough into that Kia tank, get himself to the end.
How does the strategy he's taking compare to what happened in the international race earlier?
I think in the international race, there was a lot of drivers in the Kia who weren't quite as familiar with it as we see here. I mean, for example, Barraclough in a Kia is something I've definitely seen before. There's quite a lot more European drivers familiar with it. I think the Kias are doing a lot better here and taking some different strategies than maybe some of the less experienced international split drivers.
Paul, your thoughts?
I was just about to say, David Barraclough is one of the fastest people in a Kia, along with people like George Gruber, Tim Claessens. But then you got to look at people like Pete Harrod and David E. Baker, should I say. Those two are pretty sharp in the Kia as well, because they race this car week on week in a touring car series, and so there's a lot of experience of these drivers in this car. And I think this is where maybe they will have that knowledge compared to some others who have maybe picked this car and are trying it for one of the first times.
Hermelia is also
in the background.
Pardon
My
me.
thoughts as well.
I was going to say, Hermelia also came into the pits there. Apologies for cutting you off there, David. So that's interesting. Remember, he came in a lap earlier than the rest of the Kias he was racing against. I believe this might have been a lap earlier than he usually has come in for his cycles now. So he's thinking maybe, you know what, I want to make sure I don't run out of fuel as well to be able to keep the time I've been gaining by undercutting my competitors. Speaking of competitors, the drivers that have broken into the top 8 now are 2 of the Kias, with 6 MX-5s in the top 6 still. Fetterman, Jörg, Burval, along with Niskanen. Caranjo, we have barely had a chance to talk about him for the past hour. He's quietly still in the 5th spot. Kirk Crum is in 6th. Barraclough and Harrod round out the top 8 at the moment. They have gained +2 spots this lap alone already, and are already trying to work on reeling back in Kirk Crum, who has disappeared off the racetrack. He has taken a toe, a big major mistake for both of the bombshell MX-5s. This time Crum. We'll see why here.
I think maybe he's picked up just 2 wheels on the grass on the outside and then not being able to turn. He's hit the wall there. I mean, we'll take another look because he damaged the car earlier turning onto the Nordschleife. Yes, he has that turn that takes you from the Grand Prix circuit onto the Nordschleife. Picked up a little bit of understeer there. Presumably that's damaged his suspension. He turns left all right. He gets the first right-hand turn he gets to. It just does not want to turn. And then he finds himself putting the other side of the car into the Armco, Justin.
And you see that right there. It looked like he didn't realize that the steering wheel issue happened until halfway through the corner. Then he realized, oh shoot, my steering wheel isn't going, and he turned it even more aggressive. That in turn seen where the results came forward. Still looking at the drivers that are lined up at the moment, that are still Claessens and Gruber trying to work again to reel back in for the time being. Also looking back though, Christian Schauder, remember him. He is still needing to gain spots. He's only in 21st, now 5 minutes back of Dirk Fetterman. And that pace at the moment currently puts him at least 8 minutes back to the Kias.
Yeah, Federman is doing a fantastic job with his lap times. You look at this gap to the leader that Shallen has got, it's 5 minutes, and he's got 3 laps to try and close in Federman. He's only been closing Federman at 90 seconds, or a minute and a half per lap. So he's got a 5-minute gap, and I think with 3 laps he'll close 4.5 minutes out of it. We'll have to see for both of those drivers. It could be wrong, a lot of variance still to happen. Federman's doing everything he needs right now to not be caught by Challener.
Should note he did pass an MX-5. It's one of Paul's teammates with Team Mad for the Kia, yes. And Jerome Kaiser that has had a rough day, so he has passed a Kia. The thing is, he's going to have to pass all the Kias for a chance to gain some time. The next Kia you can see is Adam Francie Pointy, who has had a very nightmarish day for Unorthodox Motorsports, has had some damage, has had to come in and use his quick repair already today, and that's why he's fallen so far back compared to the rest of his fellow Kias.
Yeah, the MX-5, you just saw him go past of Darwin Mites, also a driver who's had a tough day. Those two are now on the same lap. Mites is falling down the order. He's lost an overall position just then to that car, Adam Fasiponti.
Remember, he had to come in and get some repairs. He came out at about the same time his teammate came in for his tow truck. So he's able to still recover for 20th spot despite the big amount of distance for the tow truck. However, it's going to be hard to keep on gaining the points. He came into the day in a fairly decent spot in terms of some of our point standings that we discussed at the top of the broadcast. You don't want to lose any more points in this kind of a race, that's for sure. He came in 17th, to be exact.
Yeah, it's such a unique format, and you don't know where you stand until the last lap. And so that's you can make a mistake early in the race and think, oh goodness, that's cost me, get back out on the circuit, but not know exactly how much it's cost you until much later. We're going to see a great demonstration of the difference in speed right now though between this MX-5 and how quickly that Porsche catches him on the run down towards Fuchsroer, past before you can blink.
And you see that huge run. I don't even think I even thought about blinking. That's how quick Challenger made the pass to get on by. So he is up to now what would be about P20 now in the racetrack and still having to reel in the rest of the drivers. Meanwhile, might want to head up to where David Barricole is because he's now down to only a few seconds to the back of Clifton Naranjo while he's running on his own still. Yes, by 10 seconds compared to the next Kia. He is again closing that gap and quick. He's about 2 to 3 corners behind the next MX-5 up the racetrack as you see on the lower side of your screen.
Yep, and this sector of the track, it's just turns after turns. Now, the Kias are a little bit quicker through here than the MX-5s. It's the straight line blasts where you get to hold the throttle open for a long time, where the Kias are most at an advantage. But you can see that gap's now come down 1 second, and it will continue to close as Barricole sees a top 5 in his future. Will still owe us one tiny pit stop, one little splash of fuel to get to the end, I do believe.
We'll see if that is the case. Then one is a nerve-wracking race for sure for the drivers. Derek Fetterman still up in front, but you'll follow on with Barricole. It's down to 6 seconds now. The gap make it 7, and now under into 6 seconds as he exits the corner this time by with the amount of speed. And at this point, if you're some of the MX-5s, what do you think of as a driver at this point, knowing that the drivers with quicker paces / quicker cars, I should say, are coming up at a blistering pace? You got the Kias 2 minutes back now to the race lead. You got the Porsches 4 minutes. What's going through their minds now?
They've got to run their laps cleanly. They've just got to run their own line, and when the cars do, or if they catch them, when they catch them, they just need to run their own line, let the other class work to get past. But if you're looking at that gap behind on your timing screen, close down, close down, close down, there's nothing you can do but just not think about it too much. Focus on your own racing line, your braking points, hit all of your marks, do the best lap you can, and that's all you can do as Barricole blows by Clifton Naranjo what would the speed difference there be? As much as 80 kilometers an hour or 50 miles an hour.
To be precise, is 163 when he made the pass, 124 for the MX-5. So he is +3 now on the lap for positions. Niskanen, meanwhile, he is about to close up to him and quick as well. Remember, Niskanen, he's been beat around a little bit. He did take a quick repair, but he also beat up his front bumper on some of the rumble strips. You can see down the front stretch the distance. The Kia in the backdrop, the MX-5 entering turn 1 for P4. Then you have Burval, that is another 20 seconds up.
Yeah, you rightly point out Niskanen stopped earlier than a lot of the cars in front of him, but because of the fuel efficiency and the tank size of the MX-5, managed to get the repairs done, and I believe he is fueled to get to the end. So he's running 4th overall right now, but you can see that Kia in the background closing it in, thinking about grabbing that spot away. It's been a great run from David Barraclough to do so well that we've got 2 laps to go, and he's working his way into the top 5 already, even if he will need another splash of fuel at some point.
The estimated distance is about an hour 35 minutes to figure out who will come away with the checker flag. The thing is, there is still 55 minutes total to fully decide things, to be able to get across the line. Question is, which ones are going to get 1 spots? We're going to find out in the next couple laps here as David Barraclough closes right on in on Niskanen. He moves to the right side of the racetrack. Niskanen, Barraclough just going to charge his way right on behind and wait 1 more corner as they go quickly into the Michelin curve and head to the Warnsteiner curve. Much more faster to the arc, much earlier braking though for Barraclough to make sure he doesn't take a bite out of the MX-5. Should note, of course, those Torque Freak racing machines say eat my dust. You don't want to have your car eaten or have a bite-sized amount of damage on your car this late in the race.
No, definitely not. Barraclough does indeed make that move cleanly through. Now 4th overall, so Niskanen 5th overall. And there's some other Kias behind, and this battle between Claessens and Gruber, there's been no separating them at all. In front of them, they're going to catch an MX-5 battle of Pete Harrod and Clifton Naranjo. I think Harrod has moved up a position there as well. So, yeah, Pete Harrod in the number 1 car in a Kia has made his way through.
And Harrod's actually losing time on the track a little bit. The 2 drivers that have been working back behind him for Torque Freak Racing, they're slowly reeling him in as time goes on. At 8:55 last time for Harrod. 2 seconds slower, in fact, for Claessens and Gruber, but they did gain some net time in the past couple moments here. But you have to say, in terms of Team Mad, I'm making the same mistake as Cam did earlier. For Pete Harrod, for his team rather, I will say, he's been able to quickly get around the racetrack fairly clean and not have the mistakes like the rest of the Team Mad cars have had today.
Yep, good work from Pete so far. Obviously got past Clifton Naranjo pretty cleanly. Now 6th overall, and it won't be too long at all before he's caught Marcus Niskanen, just like David Barraclough did. So 2nd of the Kias, not so bad.
Yes, indeed, and that's going to help make sure he's able to get around the traffic quicker. Compare that to Claessens, who's checking up to make sure he doesn't run over Naranjo behind them. It gets much more challenging when you have more drivers running around you. David E. Baker also reeling in the drivers as they check up for the said traffic. The next driver they have to pass again is Niskanen as they go through the hills. But don't forget, you got those Porsches. Challenger still the first Porsche. 18th last time by, just moved up to 17th on the racetrack. Then you have drivers like Cruz moving on by. It is now 15th, pardon me, thank you very much, that he just made the pass 4. He is still minus 14 technically to where he qualified for where he can slot in for the Porsches for today's race. As the fastest Porsche in qualifying and your points leader entering today. However, to try and get max points, he's going to have to pass by a bunch of not just Kias, but MX-5s.
Yeah, he's been 1 minute 30 seconds per lap quicker than Dirk Federman throughout most of this race. When he crossed the line, the gap to Federman with 2 laps to go was more than 3 minutes, and it still hovers around that. So I think Challenger, for all of his great race pace, for being the fastest of the Porsches, He'll catch a lot of the Mazdas, but at the pace they're doing right now, both of them having taken their final pit stops, Challoner will not be able to catch Federman unless Federman runs out of fuel, has a mistake, anything like that. Dirk Federman, you rightly heap praise on his abilities in the Mazda MX-5 because he's been flawless so far and he's put in exactly the right amount of pace where I think, as things are right now, he'll end up 15 seconds ahead of Challoner. David Barraclough now into a podium position.
Making the quick pass, still 40 seconds back of him. Jorg is the next car, 6 seconds up, and then it's clean air to Federman. The question is, will Barraclough have enough time? 1.4 estimated laps to go for Barraclough right now for Torque Freak Racing with his quick speed. Harad has also made the move to get into the top 5 in the backdrop as well, as Barraclough will move his way to the left side of the track and up to P number 2, right by the Ava Vervatic MX-5 on the right side of the racetrack.
Challoner's had a little bit of a mistake at Nurburgring, I think. Not a huge problem for him, but he's pushing as hard as he can get away with. And unfortunately, not running the cleanest of lines. I think he just ran a little bit deep on the brakes in the corner. We'll see a little replay of it. The brakes are always so difficult. You see, he tries to turn in towards the apex and then doesn't get the throttle down early. That will cost him some time. And he'll know that on his Delta in the dash in the Porsche Cup car because it tells you that in the dash underneath the shift lights if your lap isn't as quick as your best.
At the same time as your explanation, one driver that did not need an error mistake. A rough day for a driver in the top 10 in points. Trevor Borowski, after trying to be passed by a Kia, slammed hard into the Armco after the Kia clipped the grass on the left side of the racetrack, got loose, forced him to get loose to avoid him with a slight touch, and into the wall he goes to the garage area as well after the mistake by the Kia.
I've seen it time again. Too wide through Schwedenkreuz. It just does not work out. So high speed, no room for error. The walls are right there on the inside and the outside. And as you come over the crest of the hill at the turn in, it can really upset the car. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult to go side by side as well. David Barraclough has gotten past Yuri Jorg. He's now 25 seconds behind Dirk Federman. He's going to have to pit this time, is David Barraclough, I think, for just a little splash of fuel, but he might be able to see Dirk Federman before he has to do that.
We'll have to watch as this is a potentially big-time case where it could make things interesting. Federman is currently working his way to the final few corners before going down the Dodder Road, should mention. And of course, Barraclough is just entering the last sector before that said area. On board with Federman right now as he tries to not make a mistake. Had a little bit of a bounce there once again, but he has been on his own for what has been the entire day today. A driver, though, that has not had a good day is Jerome Kaiser. He has just slammed into the wall once more in his team Mad Machine. Another one stuck in the fence.
Another one bites the Armco. We get a replay on board here. What he has done. This is on the way towards miss hit miss a little bit before that. What does he do? The rear gets loose on brakes, beaches it on the curb, and then magnetic into the Armco. That's very, very unfortunate for Jeroen Kaiser.
There's now two MX-5s, two Kias that are Team Mad drivers, I should say, that are in the garage. Paul, what is the discussion going to be like with your teammates to figure out what happened to your team today?
I would imagine that team boss Dave Crozier will be just saying, "Get good, son." He'll be encouraging them to. He'll be encouraging them to get better, but it's not ideal, that's for sure. But it's the Nurburgring. These things happen, and the Kia, when it gets light on fuel, that rear end it just bounces about, and it's so easy to make that mistake.
Still following along with David Barraclough at the moment. Pete Harad has also technically moved to third spot. He is still way back from Barraclough, but it's down to 9 seconds down the front. Yes, indeed.
No splash for Barraclough. White flag in the air. He does not think he needs any more fuel. He's only 7 seconds behind Dirk Federman. That is absolutely within the gap that he will be able to close them down if he has enough fuel.
And he might be able to actually make the pass in the first quarter of the racetrack. Up the road, you see that MX-5. That is Fetterman right inside onto the outside line. Also major traffic jam because Tim Clauses might have just made a mistake.
Got a replay here coming down Dottinghur towards Tiergarten. And the car behind, which was George Gruber in that case, was very, very close. What has Claeson's done? On the brakes, little bit of curb, that gets you bouncing, gets him out of shape. Goes around, does he hit the barriers? Oh, a little bit, slowly, but he did a very beautiful pirouette. And here is the overall lead.
Barraclough in the tire tracks, trying to make the move on Fetterman, the big time difference in speed. He'll fall onto the right sideline. Can Barraclough make the quick pass? Not quite yet as they go into the Michelin curb to the Warren Center curb. He might have his first big chance heading into Avon Bogan before heading into the 24-hour circuit. Here comes the pass. To the race lead goes David Barraclough. He takes the lead for the first time today on the white flag lap for the Kias. The question is, can it stick? He's got a more than a few minute lead over the next Porsche.
Yeah, he's got no slipstreaming partner right now. His last pit stop didn't look especially long, so he'll have to be very, very certain of his fuel numbers, but he is on the final lap. Now, your overall leader, Christian Chalanet, is going to take the white flag as well this time. He's in 13th, but he's got a lot of cars lined up in front of him that he'll be able to make the move on this lap.
Chauner has won 2 rounds so far in the Major Series this season for the European region. He'll try and win once more. Can he do it's the question. He's got to again gain that time on the bottom side. 1:56. Watch that time as the drivers continue to cycle around. You're going to lose the 4th spot after making a mistake in just a moment because Magnussen and Burval have been able to gain the time back up. He spun around. He's technically 7th, pardon me. Magnussen just made a pass on him. That's been done as well as you see that traffic jam. Also, the positions getting sorted up as you just seen with 2 drivers bumper to bumper. David E. Baker, George Gruber, 4th and 5th.
Last lap, and while they've now gotten past a lot of the cars that they knew they were battling from different makes, now this is a battle between themselves for points. 4th, 5th, and they are without doubt at the current pace going to catch Federman and Harrod. We could have an all Kia podium if these guys can hold it together. Nice little bit of airtime in through Flugplatz. Bit wide for Baker. Gruber, I think, had a better run.
Should note that Baker got the pass done heading into the Nordschleife part of the racetrack for the 24-hour format. Was able to make the pass on the left-hander as they get the air. The question is, can the spot get taken back by Gruber? He has been in front of Baker for a majority of the past 2+ hours. You got to be wondering what he's thinking, knowing that a driver that's been behind him this whole time has finally been able to crack through. He'll probably be thinking as well, maybe here, David, I want this spot back. I've been better than you all race. I want to prove I want to have the numbers to show it.
Yeah, they both pitted on the same lap. The tires the same age, and Gruber is right there with them. They've got 2 MX-5s they're going to pass on this lap as well. If they impede David E. Baker, or if he catches them in just an odd spot where it's not easy to get past, that could present an opportunity for George Gruber. It could also swing the other way, though, that David E. Baker gets to come through past on those MX-5s, and George Gruber is just too far behind to maybe slot through before a particular corner. So a lot to still happen on the last lap for these guys. My timing screen lights up as now all of the different Predator manufacturers, in theory, close up in each other on the last lap. Here's Pete Harrod. He's 3rd overall. He's got Dirk Federman just in front of him. He's going to put himself, you would imagine, into 2nd place and make it Kia's 1 and 2.
Let's follow on with Herard. He has been the best driver for Team Mad all day, where he hasn't had any severe damage. He hasn't had any major mistakes. He'll try and get around it for a couple more turns once more. Still a half a track to go technically for the drivers watches Herard, goes through the tree lines, makes the pass for second, and drives by like a rolling stone. Up to second he goes. Next Kias are now 12 seconds back to try and make it a full podium.
Yep, through Bergwerken now. They've got a section ahead of them that is just full throttle blast. Christian Schellner, he was 13th when he crossed the line, now 12th. Who has he got just up the road? He's going to get Marcus Niskanen, he's going to get Bram Reiners, he's going to get Yuri Jörg, he's going to get Claude Belval, but he is not going to get Dirk Faderman, he's not going to get David Barraclough. It's all about some damage limitation right now for your points leader Schellner. Can he find a top 10? I would think yes. Can he find a top 5? I'm not so sure.
Let me put it this way. The last time by, Barraclough was just a couple seconds slower, an 8:58.8 compared to Challenger's 8:31.4. That was a major difference when you got to think about it and hard to reel in. Those numbers don't line up. Challenger's still a minute 40 seconds back. On board though with Baker, he's about to try and make the pass for the third spot. Can he get it done cleanly is the question. He's also got Gruber to force the pressure to get it done fairly quickly. He tries to run the outside of the banking, able to just diamond it back down to close the door. That could have been the position right there, back to Gruber instead. Baker keeps it. He moves up one more spot. So will Gruber.
That was what I thought might happen. The carousel, of course, is just one line. And it cost David E. Baker a bit of time. Didn't give an opportunity for Gruber to try and overtake. But all of the gap, a second and more, that Baker had built out, lost. Now Tim Claessens is honestly not far behind as well. You can almost see him in the same shot as they come through Vipperman.
Yeah, you see them all lined up to the said traffic right now. Still a lot of drivers having to get by Dirk Fetterman right now. They're being checked up a little bit. Claessens is, in fact, losing a little time. Also being checked up is another one of the Kias. This is 8th and 9th, Berval and Jörg. Where we have heard that before. With Brent Vermeers making his way onto the opening on the outside line and moves himself up to 8th. Between him and Claessens, his teammate, is Matthias Magnussen on the different strategy. He is currently on his own in 7th spot to give that quick update.
This is the last lap, and that's what the Predator format is all about. That in theory, all the three classes should close up to be in the same spot on the final lap. You see these guys getting past the other class cars, not putting a lap on them, they're putting the position pass on them. And a great battle here between David E. Baker, George Gruber. Gruber with a great opportunity. Schellner has moved himself up into 11th, and he's got the possibility to make that a top 10. Positions are changing quickly all over the place.
Question is, can Baker keep on this position? Leaders are still having about a quarter of a racetrack to go. David Barraclough will follow on with him, though. He's heading down Dodger Hole because he's got one more run through it and clean air and then some. A massive lead of 17 seconds in front of Pete Herod. The question is, can he make it around the final couple corners to take the checker flag today in this Predator race? He's got only 3 more corners potentially to go. Gets to the quick right, breaks his way into the left. And one more S section to go. David Barraclough will take the checker flag and win it for the Kias. He wins the European Region's Nurburgring 2.4 Predator race here for the Major Series.
Clearly pleased with himself. Pete Harrod will follow along in not too far back, but there's been a switch. 3rd and 4th. The Gruber and Baker side by side. They're going to make contact. They're both going to go into the wall, battling for the final spot on the podium. 3rd and 4th place Kias into the wall. Claessens is through. He's going to get onto the podium.
And a big crash. They were side by side, and Gruber pushed up, exiting the Dodger Hole. Let's take a look at the replay because this will dramatically change your results. They still can't get going. You see draft from Gruber. This was something he has been matching up with his teammates all day. This time, he was faster than a non-teammate. Then, 2 drivers meet at the middle of the racing line. Big collision into the Armco. They both spin across the racetrack. They stay off the line, though, for Claessens to secure a 3rd place finish and Magnussen a 4th place finish. Both of them will still cross the line, but Fetterman, because of that wreck, will squeeze in a top 5 for the MX-5s.
Yeah, indeed he will. Christian Challoner has only got a couple of corners left to go as well. He's not going to catch Rainiers at this rate. I think it's 9th place for Challoner as it stands right now, the first of your MX-5s. But Belval and Yuri Jurg, they're side-by-side battling. They keep it clean, unlike the Kias manage. Who will come out in front of these?
Challoner coming towards the front stretch now. Big overcorrection. Berval loses the spot. And Yurg gets to the right spot at the right time. He'll come across to the checker flag and finish in the top 10 today, making the pass at the last moment on Claude Berval.
The top 10 have now all crossed over the line. A lot of other drivers out there still to make it some more battles, and of course we've had great battles in the MX-5s all race long. Kurt Krum, Darwin Meintz, teammates working together for a lot of the race, but will they be friendly teammates when they see the checkered flag waving and one can finish in front of the other?
And remember, their team came up on top of the team standings today. They had both of these drivers to take fast repairs at about the same time, separated by maybe 1 lap on the racetrack. The question is, which way will they go in terms of trying to make the move? They go through the first carousel. It's still going to be very difficult to try and make the pass for either of these drivers still, despite being as far back as they are. You also have 20th and 21st still potentially to be swapped. This is between a Porsche and a MX-5. As you can tell, Porsche overpowers MX-5.
Yeah, the Porsche with a lot more horsepower and much wider slick tyres to put it down as well, and they've got the whole length of the Dottinger in front of them, which of course is much faster for the Porsche. So Sean Fleming will grab that 20th place away from Peter Verstrel. Still 24th, 25th, Darwin Meintz battling it out, and Edu Villa isn't far in front of them if I'm correct as well. 23rd through 25th. Could be something to battle for. No, I'm wrong. It's just these two, Krum and Meintz.
And there's also some drivers slowly working their way through in some of the Porsches that have had some rough times today that are working their way through. Some more drivers crossing the line. Valverde coming across in 19th officially. The race is still not over for some drivers. They still have 9 minutes to cross the stripe. There's also the MX-5 that we've seen getting zoomed on by before a few minutes ago. And Peter Vostro, who has had a roller coaster of a race. He'll roller coaster his way to 21st position after being as high as the top 10 in the MX-5s today. He'll also come in front of Travis Henderson, Ido Vila as well in terms of the finishing positions. A couple more again, still that closest battle at the moment is still the Bombshell Motorsports drivers. They might get broken up maybe in the final straightaway by Sylvain Malod. We haven't talked about Malod all day today because he had trouble from the start. He is quickly catching up to these drivers slowly but surely. The question is, does he have enough time?
I think about 50 seconds back. No, only 16 seconds back. So it's very, very possible he could gain as much as that just through the Dottinger. It's possible. Could be maybe just a teeny bit too much. The battle between Krum and Meintz, though, that's going to be fantastic because the slipstream in these MX-5s always fantastic. Meintz would have loved to have been closer. They would love if they were closer together, but it's still possible from back here. You see the gap closes very, very quickly.
Meintz not in the reach of the slipstream more than enough, maxing out the lev limiter, in fact, at 127 miles per hour. Krum, though, is slower right now. He's actually letting off the gas, heading towards the corner at 120, and letting Meintz reel himself back into this. So this could be interesting between the two teammates. Meintz is closing up to now 1 car length after the checkup for Krum. Krum going to hold on to the right side of the racetrack. Meintz trying to sidetrack from the left side as they'll go side by side into one of the last hard braking zones. Meintz, in fact, makes the pass, gets the job done. The Porsche, though, is coming up. Here comes Malod trying to battle once again for the lower parts of the top 20. Outside that range, not enough time, I think, for Malod. Meintz now checks up for Krum. The Porsche, though, says hello. Malod gets across the line at the checker flag.
I think absolute 3-car drag race out of the final corner. I think the Porsche might have just gotten there. I'm not sure we'll get confirmation, but a fantastic photo finish there, really. Further down the field, it'd be lovely if we had it higher up the field, but nonetheless, what an exciting finish, and that's what the Predator format is all about. It's a different way of racing, but it's produced some exciting racing.
That was 24th that Malad came around with today. There's still a couple more drivers chugging along that have had disaster of a days. Franco Scurry, Thomas Peterson on the lead lap as the last drivers left on the circuit. It was a nightmare for Scurry today. He had to go in early on today, did not get anywhere. Thomas Peterson was a lap down a majority of the time on the scoring pylon. They'll come across the stripe 27th and 28th in their beat-up Porsches. Let's take a look at your full race results as the last of the drivers have crossed the checker flag for today's event. But David Barraclough for Torque Freak Racing is the one who's going to be able to pick up the checker flag and celebrate here at the Nurburgring. Pete Harrod came away second, 17 seconds back, with Tim Clausen's rounding out the top three. Matthias Magnussen came away fourth after a big-time crash between the drivers that finished off 6 and 7, George Gruber. Dirk Fetterman sandwiched his way into the top 5 as the highest finishing MX-5 today after the crash. Graham Reniers came away 8th. Christian Challenger, the top Porsche today, came away 9th. With a lot of his drivers in the point standing struggling this round, there's a chance he keeps the points lead and then some. Top 10 is Yuri Yurk. Claude Burval finished off 11th. Gabriel Roos in 12th. Marcus Niskanen finished 13th, with Enrico Lionheart having a very quiet day, coming away in 14th position, started off 22nd. A big-time run for him in a quiet one. Diego Jimenez Norima came away 15th after pitting early to make sure he made it on fuel. Ramjo and Rushborough came away 16th, 17th. Fancy Potty, along with Velarde and Sean Fleming, round out the top 20. Peter Vostro came away 21st as well, with Travis Henderson and Ido Vila finishing off the top 23. And Sylvian Malad, after a drag race, came away 24th. Kirk Crum, Darwin Mintz, the teammates, come away 25th, 26th. Franco Scurry, Thomas Peterson round out the drivers that finished today's race. The DNFs, some of them will hurt the point standings. Trevor Versky came away 29th. He came in top 10 in the points. A run with Jerome Keisner coming away 30th. Marcel Unger struggled from the get-go, finished off 31st, while Otis Hakeldis, finishing off in 32nd. David H. Baker took a couple different times for repairs. 33rd is his finishing position. Michael Blake, Lyndon Swaby, Joshua Wolf, Eric Mickey, along with Riley Thompson, your DNFs. Jean-Francois Arsenault did not make the starting grid for today's race for Can-Am Racing. A heck of a race today here on RaceSpot TV and the iRacing Esports Network. We'll be back with your post-race coverage right after these messages. Welcome back to the Nurburgring here in beautiful Germany as David Barriclough came away with the victory today after making a pass on the final lap on Dirk Fetterman and his Kia, getting the Kias their first win of the 3 races for the major series for the Predator events for the Nurburgring 2.4 hours to win the European region. Justin Prince with David Haynes. We've been also joined by Paul Smith and Cam Walsh throughout today's broadcast. Let's speak with your race winner because it was a heck of a drive for one of the top drivers in all of Kias in the iRacing service. Torque Freak Racing's David Barriclough came away with the checker flag. David, how does it feel to be able to come away with the checker flag today to win this Predator race? A heck of a challenging race by far.
Yeah, it feels pretty good, David. Hi everyone. I had a lot of fun with that. That was a really good fun race, and yeah, just really pleased to come out with the top position.
This is Justin speaking, though, David. Thank you very much. Though either way, it's okay. But how difficult was it to try and manage this kind of a race today, knowing that you had to make up basically a full nearly 14 laps? That's, of course, having to start from the pits, a 10-minute delay in total, about 1 lap from the rest of the MX-5s.
Yeah, so spent most of the first 10 minutes just watching the MX-5s out on the track battling away. That was quite good fun. There's some good action going on down the Duttinger Höhe. Then, yeah, jumped back in the car when they got getting to the end of the Höhe and made the start. It was a little bit of a frantic start, I want to say. So a couple of guys won and lost a few positions on that one. But I was able to get away and keep the lead, and had Matthias behind me for the first stint, so it was just about trying to stay ahead of him and but also save a little bit of fuel while I was doing, because that was the kind of most important thing for the race, really.
As we're seeing on your screen, the pass that got the job done. It took you a few corners once you reached Dirk Fetterman. How difficult was it knowing that it wasn't as simple as just lap traffic, knowing similar to some endurance races that would be a class, but knowing this was for the race win, despite even, of course, the very difference in speed?
Yeah, I mean, Dirk was playing a few games with a few little weaves as I was coming up to him, but the 380-odd brake horsepower can't be denied for the Kia. This may be the last race I ever do in the car, actually, but I'm really going to miss the thing if that turns out to be the case. We'll see. I might do the odd VLN race, but I think with it not being in the 24-hour race, this would be a great way to send it off. So by the time I got there, once it got to a straight, and it was just game over, really.
Wait, why is this potentially the last race you would do in the Kia?
Well, it's not being used in the 24-hour race, and I don't run it most of the year. As a team, we focus on the GT endurance cars, and it has been hinted at, I believe, if not announced, that iRacing may be producing a new front-wheel drive car. So my hopes are, of course, that it'll come out reasonably soon, but of course nothing's been confirmed yet, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. As far as VLN races go, I did spend myself and George Gruber. We ran the car at the VLN last season and came away with the class win there, but we haven't been running it this year, so we'll wait and see. Maybe I'll run the VLN race in the Kia, but I don't normally run it other than that.
I want to also ask about this. This was a question that was been discussed between Paul and David, especially the fuel. Some of them saying you can go 4, some of them you can save to 5, as seen a little bit, in fact, with the international race. What was the key to making sure you had enough fuel to get to the finish, to get to the winning strategy of, in turn, just 2 pit stops?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the car has, I don't know if you're aware, has a very slow fueling mechanism. It's modeled on just a simple non-pressure fed system, so it takes a long time to fuel up, and what that means is that every single drop of fuel that you save on the track equates to a much faster pit stop, as well as being able to go the extra lap and cut out a whole run down the lane as well. So every lap I was lifting and coasting, saving fuel. just waiting behind the MX-5s where I had to, and minimizing my usage, making it to 5 laps. In fact, saving a little bit of fuel beyond the 5 laps so that I had a faster pit stop. And it seemed to work out well. I built the gaps in the first couple of stints. The last stint, I took it a little easy. It's really challenging to push every lap at the Nordschleife. So yeah, the last stint, I just took no risks because I could see in advance that I would have enough for the MX-5 field. So yeah, it was just about taking care of it then. But to answer your original question, fuel was very important this race.
How much fuel did you have left, just to clarify to the fans at home?
Oh, at the end. So I was able to finish the race with 2 liters or thereabouts in the car, just enough for some reverse donuts in reverse gear.
Okay, of course, coming away with the victory here in this race for the Major Series. What should we expect next for you, whether it's in the Major Series or in the near future for the schedule?
Yeah, so I really like to do more Major Series races. They're a fantastic league, really well run by Mike and John and everyone who organizes the races over at Majors. I just really like to thank them for putting on this race today. It was a great race. So yeah, I'd like to definitely do a number of more of those over the summer, especially the Spa 2.4. Really enjoyed that one last year. So yeah, looking forward to that one for the Major Series. As far as other events go, we're right in the middle of our preparations for the 24-hour race next week. We're going to be running a Porsche in that one. We're going to be switching over to put full focus onto that. And then after that, I guess we've also got the 24-hour of Le Mans to look forward to a little bit later on this year. The fun never really stops when it comes to the endurance series and scene on iRacing. It's all good.
Anyone you want to thank before we let you get going here, David?
Yeah, I've already thanked the Majors guys, the organisers, but I thank them again. They've done a great job with this series, building it up over the last few years, and I really always enjoy running their races. I'd like to thank also the team, everyone in Discord who ran the race with me and who supports us. We worked on the setup over the last few years, actually, for this car. So this race was actually a kind of fruition for a long journey as a team together. So it kind of pays testament to all the hard work that everyone's put in to that. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Infinity Decals. They get it done for us. If you ever need any design work done for clothing, anything like that, just go on over to their website. They'll be able to sort out something for you. And finally, thanks to you guys for broadcasting the race. I'll be sure to watch it back over the course of this week, maybe at some lunch breaks, that kind of thing. So yeah, looking forward to watch it back, and thank you very much for the broadcast.
Thank you very much for the time, David. Congratulations on the W.
Cheers, guys.
That was David Berkhold coming away with the checker flag today, winning today's Nurburgring 2.4 hours for the European region. And before we get going here, first off, David, your final thoughts on what was a heck of a race here today.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this Predator format just because it's something we don't see that often. Gives us a different perspective on an endurance race. We've got to look at the timing screen differently. There's different driver strategies out there, and when you see a faster car and a slower car, in this case, the faster car doesn't necessarily have the right of way laps ahead of the slower car. So great different format, makes people think differently about how they plan out their race. It's great to watch. And if you can't get enough, of course, then the Americas region's also going to be on the iRacing Esports Network in a couple hours' time.
And Paul, your thoughts before we send things off and get everyone prepared for that America's race?
Yeah, that was a really, really enjoyable race. I thoroughly think it's a great format. It suits the circuit as well. I think it'd be more difficult to implement that on a short track. So definitely that was really enjoyable, and it was fun to see how the different cars were coming up through the field. And all the best, and hopefully the next Majors event is going to be an absolute cracker as well.
Absolutely. Of course, that suggestion involving Cam's suggestion to have one at Bristol. That's going to be challenging for sure. Also going to be challenging is the Americans region. for today's Predator race for the 2.4 hours at the Nurburgring. That starts off at approximately 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time for coverage on the Global Sim Racing channel on the iRacing Esports Network. Be sure to stick around and tune in for that for the American region. Also, be sure to tune in for the rest of our broadcast on with the RaceSpot family. Next time, RaceSpot's live on the iRacing Esports Network. The World of Outlaws series for the NOS Energy Drink Sprint Cars Championship, 9 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. But it's time to say goodbye here from the Nurburgring. We'd like to thank our sponsors on our screen, including Esteban Burwell from TrackCams22.com, along with Anwar Design for the great graphics packages you've been seeing so far in the past couple weeks since their debut. Also like to thank Paul Smith for being a part of today's broadcast, not just in the commentator's booth, but of course in the director's seat. A heck of a broadcast and a heck of a job by you. A heck of a job as well from my partners today in Cam Walsh and David Haynes. Like to thank Cam for being a part of the first hour of today's broadcast, and David Haynes for being a part of the final hour and 40 minutes of today's coverage, and a part of a second total race for the major series of splits entering this weekend's action. But with that, I'm Justin Prince saying so long from Germany. We'll see you next time here on the iRacing Esports Network. Have a rest of a wonderful Sunday, everybody.